Hey everyone, Amiya here from Resonance Astrology, and welcome to my channel, and also welcome to the Meet the Planets series. Today we're going to talk about Jupiter, and I'm joined by a lovely Janessa. She's going to introduce herself in just a second. So we are entering the realms of fate, of belief, and we're slowly, we've gone through this. Jupiter is obviously still one of the seven inner planets, but I feel like we're slowly going further and further, and it's becoming a bit like the overview. We're entering Jupiter's realm, and I'm really excited about talking about this planet. We're recording this, by the way, on December 15th at around 5 p.m. Central European time. And in this series, we are the first of all, the aim of the series is really to give you an overview of the archetype of what the planets are, but then also to do it very grounding and practical for you to be able to see how can I connect with Jupiter on a day-to-day basis. And so we're going to talk about dignities, where Jupiter does well, where it exalts, and where Jupiter doesn't do so well, to in which sect Jupiter rejoices, Jupiter as a benefic planet in general, and then also going through the archetype, a bit of the mythology, and the Jupiter cycles, right? Because Jupiter has a 12-year cycle. So we're going to talk about Jupiter returns, and we are also going to talk a bit about what Jupiter means in medical astrology. And then we're going to close it off with talking about how can you connect with Jupiter on a day-to-day basis in your day-to-day life. And so I'm joined by Janessa, and I feel like now she can introduce herself.
Thanks, Amiya. I'm Janessa. You might know me as byjoveastro on social media, Substack. I've been practicing astrology since 2022, and I'm excited to be here today.
Yes, and let me just for the people to know, what are your Jupiter credentials for this episode?
Yeah, so I'm a Pisces rising, so Jupiter is my chart ruler, and I have Jupiter in Aries in the second house. And a couple of Sagittarius placements. So my MC is in the first decan. I've got Saturn in the second decan. And then I've got Uranus in the third decan of Sagittarius. So got a couple different flavors here, but yeah, very kind of a fiery, I would say, perspective on Jupiter from me.
Yes, that's great. And my chart is not very Jupiterian coded, but I do have Jupiter in Aquarius in an angular house in my fourth house. And I was talking to Janessa about this before. It's really, even if you don't have a strong Jupiterian influence or any other of the planetary influences that we sometimes talk about, just by default through transits and through perfection years and all of these timing techniques, sometimes certain planets can take the forefront, and it's like you connect to them on a completely different level, even if they might not be such a strong presence in your natal chart. So it really, at any time, if Jupiter is a strong presence in your life, it's worthwhile connecting to that planet. I mean, as definitely when you get your Jupiter return is when you are connecting to Jupiter, because that happens every 12 years and it lasts for about a year. Jupiter is in a sign for about a year. So it's a longer period that we are getting with this planet for the first time. Like right now, we've talked about the moon, Mercury, they are super fast. The sun, we have like 30 days of the sun. And then Mars is a bit longer, but then Jupiter kind of like breaks that spell for the first time. And it's like, well, I'm here for an entire year. So I feel like that's interesting to note. And right now, we are lucky enough that we have Jupiter's graceful presence in the sign of Cancer, because I'm really trying to time this whole series with the planets kind of being in the domicile signs or exalted signs, which sadly for Saturn, we won't have that chance. But for Jupiter, we are lucky enough. We have a whole year of Jupiter in Cancer. So that's why we can film this now. And we can also talk about that because the first thing I always talk about are the dignities, because that's how we get to know how that planet works and how it expresses itself in its home sign or domicile sign, interchangeably the same thing, where it's in its fall, so where Jupiter is not doing so well, detriment as well, where Jupiter is not doing so well, and exaltation, which, yeah, Jupiter is currently at now. So maybe let's first talk about the domicile of Jupiter, because that is Sagittarius and Pisces.
Yeah, so Pisces, I'll start with that one.
Yes, let's do that.
Yeah, Pisces is the watery domicile of Sagittarius. And actually we can start by talking about both maybe that they're both mutable
Yes.
signs. So I think that says a lot of the nature of Jupiter right there is that they're mutable, they come at the end of a season, and they're very much about like seeing the duality of things, like seeing the light and dark. And yeah, just that dual nature, I think, is like key to a lot of the Jupiterian themes. Pisces being the water sign domicile is going to be more about like the emotions and the intuition, um, a lot more, yeah, of like that like inner yin kind of feeling of Jupiter versus um Sagittarius that is more of like the yang and like the outward expression. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, first of all, I was just looking at like our outfits and I'm like, it feels like you're Jupiter in Sagittarius and I'm Jupiter in Pisces.
Yeah, we planned that. Totally.
Exactly. I mean, there is a difference, right? Because it's like we have mutable fire and we have mutable water in one, and it's like not the same at all. And in Sagittarius, we don't have any planets that are fallen or exalted. So it's like the home sign of Jupiter, the domicile of Jupiter, and the detriment of Mercury. But then in Pisces, we have first of all the domicile of Jupiter, but then also we have an exaltation of Venus. So both the benefic planets are doing extremely well in the sign of Pisces, which gives it a different flavor. And then conversely, in Pisces, obviously, Mercury is in its fall. Yeah, Mercury's in its fall and its detriment in the sign of Pisces. Exactly. That kind of the odd one out thing. But even just that gives it a different flavor. So, and it's interesting that both of these signs and also the Mercury signs, they are coming at the end of a season. All of the mutable signs come at the end of a season. They're when they initiate the shifting of the gears. And well, we're in Sag season right now. As a matter of fact, we're kind of like finishing it up because this weekend we're gonna have the winter solstice where we enter Capricorn and we're entering a new season. And I think the Jupiter signs, at least here in the northern hemisphere, right, they are before both of the times before the sun gains more power. So Sagittarius is just before the winter solstice when the days start getting longer again, even though we're still in a dark part of the year. But then Pisces is just before the spring equinox when the sun fully takes over and we begin the astrological new year. And so I think even here we see that component of like faith and imagination. It's not yet so tangible. It's more visioning, but it's not so much yet doing, which is more like the realm of Mercury. So, yes, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think that's kind of where like we get the themes of like hope that Jupiter has is kind of like, oh, there's this light at the end of the tunnel. Like I especially think about that with like Sagittarius season coming after Scorpio, like the in the northern hemisphere, like the darkest of the dark, we
Hmm.
don't in Scorpio season we can't really see the light at the end of the tunnel. And then when we get to Sag season, it's like okay, we know like the solstice is coming and um all of the like jovial themes of that time of year are really like based around that switch that happens at the end of it. Even though it's still like the darkest time of year, it's like that little light at the end of the tunnel that's like, no, it's coming, the sun's coming. And then similarly, it's like Pisces with getting to that equinox point where it's like the light is going to start to take over and triumph over the dark or and I think that there are themes. I do want to be careful of like shaming the dark too, right? Like there's nothing necessarily like inherently bad about the
Oh
dark.
yeah.
But yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think it's from a language perspective, we just need something that describes the themes, right? But I do also want to make people aware that when we are talking about dark and light, it's definitely not in a like positive negative type of way. It's just clearly if you look outside, and I'm looking outside right now, and it's what like 5 p.m. here. It's freaking dark already right now because we're edging to that part right where we have that longest night of the year. And so I do think Sagittarius, especially, I like the word you said. For me, it's so much about that flame that's at the end of the tunnel, the light that's at the end of the tunnel, and that spark of hope that's never dying. We also say hope dies last. That makes so much sense with Sagittarius, especially. I feel like with Pisces, there is a hope component, but it's more in the realm of imagination and like imagining the hope. With Sagittarius, is it there is an imagining component to it for sure as well. But it's a bit different than in Pisces, I believe. In Pisces, I think it's a bit more rose-colored glasses, the way we look at things and the way we envision things. But certainly, both of them have to do with these components.
Totally. Yeah, I think there's something else I wanted to throw out there too that has been kind of interesting to me. And I haven't heard like a lot of people talk about it, but I think it was Rob Hand that mentioned, or one of the Robs, it could be that could be a Um, but like mentioned like just in an offhanded comment that I saw that Sagittarius is actually the preferred domicile of Jupiter. And I think that it has to do with it being diurnal and that it's
Mm.
the young or this concept of Sagittarius being a diurnal sign. So I don't know, just throwing it out there. I think it's interesting when we can get more and more nuance from some of those old texts. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can certainly see it. And again, in Pisces, we have the realm of not just Jupiter, but of Venus as well. It's really, and I feel like to get to know Pisces, you really have to get to know like Venus at its best, because that's the realm of Pisces. So Jupiter is definitely present there, but Venus is equally present as well in that sign, and that's where the like I feel like with Sag, it's a lot more direct, if that's the right word, the hope and the vision and everything. With Pisces, it's a lot more dreamy, right? That's why Pisces is associated with the realm of dreams and of imagining and what happens when we go to sleep. Where do we go with everything? And with Sag, I think it's a lot more practical, and I think it kind of needs to be because Sag season comes before the winter. So it's like we need that realm of hope when we enter the two consecutive Saturn seasons, which are like almost like a smack in the face after that Jupiterian season of Sagittarius that we were having. Pisces feels a lot more like it experienced the two Saturn season, and now it's almost like more chill. I guess that's if that's the right word. So there is definitely that type of difference between
Mhm.
both of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think too, I've done some work kind of looking at like the rising signs and what that can kind of say actually about the sign itself. And so Sagittarius rising has Leo in the ninth house. And I just think that that's kind of where, because the sun, wherever it is in the chart, is going to
Mm.
rule that ninth house. So like I think there's like this really strong case for it just being more solar and then also like those ninth house connotations of like long distance travel and like beliefs and like it really kind of doubles down almost on these Jupiterian themes in a lot of ways. Um, so yeah, I don't know if you have
Yeah,
anything.
no, that's a good observation. I haven't made that yet, but it makes complete sense. And it's also in Sag, I feel like the fire is so strong because it's the only fire sign in the dark part of the year. Like in winter, we don't even have a fire sign, right? But in autumn, it's like the sign that does the transition between both of these seasons. So it really is like that candle that is lit in the dark, but because it is lit in the dark, we can see and experience just how strong it is. It's different than Leo sees it in summer when it's hot and warm outside and we constantly have light. So there's definitely, I feel like that difference. And then even right now, I mean the Christmas lights and all that decoration goes up during Sag season pretty much. Everything is lit up. Even now, again, I'm looking I'm looking outside and I can see the lights that the people put up on their balconies. And for me, yeah, it does carry some sort of hope. Um, that afterwards we enter like January, February, usually not the most famous months known for like festivities and we're doing great. Here we even say something like Januarloch, which is like January hole. I don't know if you say that in English, but it's really like where all the festivities have kind of passed and now it's Saturn, of course. And so with Pisces, there is almost a bit of a touch of like melancholy because we've experienced Saturn. With Sag, it's like we're before that. We didn't yet go there. But we need that hope to carry us. We need that fire, that inner fire to like carry us through that dark time of the year of the two Saturn seasons.
Yeah, and at the same time, there's like it's like that hope that we're going to carry on, but then we're kind of like because it's the duality, like we're looking backwards too and kind of
Mhm.
like celebrating all of the things that we did do this year, right? Like it comes, we're through the harvest. It's kind of like when we get to like really reap the benefits and like all of the good things that we did throughout the year. It's like now we get to like enjoy them and celebrate and for Sagittarius at least. And then I think from Pisces too, it's like it's a little less celebratory, but it's also like, we got through we got through those two Saturn signs and now like, the spring is here and we've made it. And yeah, depending on where you live. But yeah.
Yeah, I feel like despite both of the benefics doing so well in Pisces, Pisces feels like a heavier sign, because it feels like it carries like a lot of the emotionality of like the rough things in life. And it's almost like the hope of Pisces kind of comes from that place of being like, oh, after these two Saturn season, what is there left but to hope, but to dream, but to wish? And then of course, right, we enter Aries and that's Mars, and then it's about the doing again. But I feel like that's where like we're ending on with Pisces, and it's yeah, it definitely carries like it's not the easiest energy. I feel like at least for me, a lot of times Pisces energy is not the easiest for me to handle. Can be quite rough in a way to land there. And maybe it's right now because we're all a bit tired of Saturn and Neptune being in Pisces as well. Uh, so yeah, I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that there is something kind of melancholy about, it's an ending and a beginning, right? So there's
Yeah.
like this nostalgic maybe feel of Pisces. Maybe it's like the moon's like triplicity rulership there, where it's kind of like looking back or about memory and um definitely I think Saturn has not helped with any of that. Um but yeah, I think I would agree. Yeah. And I think that time of year is difficult. It's like where I live in Minnesota, it's like we're pretty far north, so like it's like when I want it to be spring, and then it's like not really spring yet until like really until Taurus season here. Um, and so it's kind of always like I make it to that point and I'm like, but wait, there's more. It's still going to snow here. So yeah, I think that it does, it never quite, and maybe this is just the past few years with Saturn there, like that's been most of my time actually studying astrology. Um, it has been like a little bit of a disappointment, honestly, when we get to that season and it's like, oh, like we'll get there, it will be great. Like we just got to get through Aquarius season, and then like it's not as big of a relief as I typically picture it being.
I can relate. I feel like that was actually one of the reasons that I got into astrology, if I can say it like that, is I realized there's always something brewing middle of March. Like something is happening. And then I realized, oh, it's that shift from Pisces to Aries, and that's happening.
Yeah.
And that is quite a shift. I mean, it's quite a shift from Aries to Pisces. I feel like it's one of the more abrupt shifts in the zodiac signs. But talking about the decans, right? It's like the same ruled decan, right? Of the last decan of Pisces is ruled by Mars, right? And then that first decan of Aries is also ruled by Mars. And so I feel like that transition point here is definitely like a death rebirth type of thing. And obviously this year particularly has been a bit rough on that, and we have been totally in that threshold because so many planets have been crossing that line back and forth. Neptune and Saturn are still doing it, but we had that Venus retrograde doing that. And we also had Mercury retrograde doing that as well, beginning of the year. So I think that's why a lot of people are probably experiencing that. On a more rough note, I feel like this year is just particularly a bit rough on that transitionary period. Now I said it right.
Yeah, yeah, that's been a busy degree. And I wouldn't qualify myself as like a modern astrologer, but it is really interesting, I think, to think about that as like the start of the year being Aries and like or the start of the zodiac being Aries, and then
Hmm.
Pisces kind of being the ending or like the conglomeration of like all 12 signs. And like if you think about it that way, it really does make sense as to why that would feel pretty heavy, I think.
Yes, and talking about heavy, let's maybe talk a bit about the detriment of Jupiter, which is going to be in the opposite signs of Sagittarius and of Pisces, so Virgo and Gemini. So it's the Mercury ruled signs. So there's like an opposition between Mercury and Jupiter. In my opinion, one of the more easily dealt with oppositions. I feel like other planets and their oppositions tend to be a bit rougher. I think with like the Mercury and Jupiter signs, it's a bit easier because a lot of the dispute is about opinion, belief, faith, logic, all of that, which are things that can be loaded for sure, but there's also like it's so personal that I feel like it, and so it's the mutable signs of like, so of course there's like more room to wiggle around and kind of find a middle ground. Um, But yeah, let me know what you have to say about just the detriment in first place.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree that there's a lot more wiggle room. I feel like especially for Mercury, like just because like he's a psychopomp, right? Like he can go
Hmm.
back and forth and kind of do what he wants. Um, but yeah, I think that for me, I've experienced it more as like, oh, I want to, as a Jupiterian person, I really want to talk about like the big picture, and like I I can be very detail oriented when I feel like it, but like I think when I get forced into that or something, like where it's like all these like little small parts, I definitely have a hard time with that, where it's like we lose the forest for the trees or whatever, like
Hmm.
all those different things like that. So yeah, I think Mercury wants to do these like little things, and like Jupiter wants to do these big things, and when they're trying to um do that for the other sign, it's like that's where it gets tricky and tripped up a little bit.
It does. And if I'm just thinking about the actual planets in the sky and how they look and how they are, it's like Mercury is this super small planet and Jupiter's like bam, biggest gassy planet that we have. It's like try fitting that. I mean, you can fit that tiny planet in, but it kind of like almost doesn't work. It's like a completely different dimension that they operate in. And I think you said it well. It's like Jupiter has this like bigger picture and bigger vision and like can see things from above, but it can miss the details. And then Mercury is kind of like the opposite force, right? It's like very detail oriented, but then it fails to zoom out sometimes and see that bigger thing. And it can almost get like sucked in the whirlwind of like just thinking like what's the logical next step and not think about the grander vision of things and where things should be going. But again, I feel like it's definitely easier to kind of like intertwine these forces together. We had, before we had the Jupiter in Cancer, this year, Jupiter was in Gemini. And certainly it wasn't like the best time ever, but I feel like it wasn't the worst time ever either. At least how I experienced it with some other planets that are in a position of detriment. So it's just like easier to do the mercurial things which have to do with like dissecting and logically being like this is point A, this is point B. How do I get there? Jupiter is almost like I don't care about that. Like what is that quote? Like there's like that quote from Einstein something like logic will take you from A to B, but imagination will take you anywhere. Like that's Mercury and Jupiter, 100%. And it's not like me trying to say that logic is a bad thing at all, but just to see like both of the sides of these planets and why Jupiter wouldn't do so well in Virgo and in Gemini.
Totally. Yeah, and I think the one caveat I would say to like saying that maybe it's not so bad is like if you are a Jupiter ruled person or like, have Jupiter ruled planets where it's like, okay, then we can talk about detriment really as like being indicative of like health issues or being more of a struggle, I would say, than if it's less of an important planet for you. I think like when we get into detriment, then it's like, okay, yeah, it wasn't as easy maybe health wise or whatever when Jupiter is in detriment or your chart ruler. So
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, it also depends like which house Jupiter is traveling. Um, through but I will say Jupiter and Gemini was traveling through my eighth house, which is not an easy house, but I did feel, and we're going to talk about that later, Jupiter serves like a force of protection, and I do feel like I was protected during that time despite Jupiter being in like a detrimental position from these like harsher topics. But I will say it also um like it started with a crisis moment that wasn't pleasant, but ended up then leading me to get better help and care. And that's like the interesting thing that Jupiter does. And like we're going to talk about that a bit later on, where Jupiter is a bit of a tricky planet sometimes with like expansion and all of that. It's not so pleasant, not just or not just. So that's what I can say, at least from my point of view. So I can kind of see both sides. Like it definitely wasn't the easiest time, but it did also in these houses that are kind of hard to deal with, definitely served as a force of protection. Like I was almost a bit sad when Jupiter left, even though we love Jupiter in Cancer, but still. I don't know if
yeah.
there's if you have like an experience or something you want to share.
Yeah, I don't know if I have one off the top of my head, but I do think like the silver lining, like you're saying, is really a good um a good example of like what that can play out
Mhm.
like where there was maybe a bad situation that came up, but it's like at the end of the day it all ends up okay because Jupiter's there helping out. Um, but yeah, not like the it's not gonna fix everything, right? Like Jupiter's in Cancer and the world is still on fire. So like I think we all know, it's not a fix all, even though it would be nice if it was.
Definitely, which yeah, I think maybe we can talk about Jupiter and Cancer now and talk about the exaltation of Jupiter. So exaltation is like almost like a queen king type of position where it's like the planet does very well there. When Jupiter checks into the Cancer hotel, it's like it's an aqua park. No, but Jupiter just does very well there. And we're experiencing it right now. But I love what you said of it's not the saving grace or not just the saving grace. And it's I feel like with Jupiter, there's a big gestation period. Obviously, the realm of Cancer is also the realm of the moon, so it almost does feel like a bit of a rebirth. It makes sense that a lot of things that Jupiter is doing in Cancer still right now, and its retrograde period as well, is kind of still part of the metaphorical pregnancy we are experiencing in these houses in our lives. And probably come next summer when Jupiter moves into Leo and we get to look back at that Jupiter and Cancer arc, well, only then we will see like, oh, like this was the purpose behind all of that, and it actually helped me, even though maybe again it was like the expansion wasn't so pleasant. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it also just speaks to the nature of astrology and that like even though we have this the greater benefic like in its exaltation, there's a lot of other things going on in the sky. And it's a team effort. Like we can't just look to one planet to like solve all of our problems, I would say. So, yeah. Yeah, and I think that it's interesting too, like a lot of great astrologers have pointed out that like the Jupiter in Cancer, because Cancer is ruled by the moon, there are these associations of like memory and like looking back, like nostalgia kind of thing. Um, and also just like, it's a sign of the crab and like the kind of Cancer has connotations of being like the overprotective mother or, those kinds of themes. So like looking back, especially in US history and how that has been like typically associated with things like nationalism, like we don't want people in our space or um and also romanticizing that or like the nostalgia for this time period when that was happening is very much Jupiter in Cancer, even though we'd like to think that it's like all of these like great Jupiterian themes of like your beliefs and all of that. It's like, well, it doesn't necessarily specify like what beliefs, right? Like we don't get to pick which ones get, you know, left in the past and which ones get brought up again.
Yeah, agreed. It's like beliefs, like the structures of beliefs in the realm of Jupiter have a lot to do with righteousness as well. And then it becomes this thing of like, are you in the tribe or are you outside of the tribe? It can easily get very black and white. We can certainly see it on a global level. Like, and again, beliefs can be so polarizing. Um, in a way, right? Like the good thing about that is like when you know what is your tribe, you feel safe and secure in that place. But at the same time, it's like, oh, well, you're outside of that. Well, it can easily get violent. Not to get into everything that's happening in the world right now, but like we can see that, right? So it's certainly, as you said, I mean, exaltation also just means like it's very strong. And that certainly also is that part. And what I have also seen a lot of people experiencing a lot of grief through
Mhm.
Jupiter and Cancer, which I think is part of the expansion period that Jupiter often brings. And I think a lot of people just forget that expansion isn't necessarily a pleasant thing at all. Like it's nice when you're out of it, but like when you're in it and you're like you're birthing and expanding, like oof, that's not so pleasant. That can be quite hard. And what I have always liked to associate as like an image with that and thinking of the crab, well, crabs are creatures that molt. And so it's growing pains. That's literally Jupiter in Cancer. It's growing pains. It's not just pleasant. Like sure, at the end of the tunnel, when we reach summer and we've gone through the journey, it's gonna be like, oh, nice. Like I've unlocked a new chapter. But right now, it's like, and I think a lot of times we forget that to experience more pleasure in life, we also have to experience our capacity to feel pain and grief and all of that, because then it opens us to another level of capacity to also experience the pleasurable things in life. So it's a bit interchangeable here, and it's certainly not just a pleasant experience to go through, even if by the end we're like, oh, I'm so grateful for that. But the beginning, I don't know, not so sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like reminding me of and I don't know, maybe there's a better time to talk about this in the conversation, but my not my last Jupiter return, but the one before that when I was 24,
Hmm.
I was coming off of a period where I had graduated college in the last recession and I was like an art major, a German major, and there just were not a lot of jobs. Everybody was saying to my generation, like, go to college and then you'll like have this great career and you'll be able to pay off all your student loans and all of this stuff. So everybody did, and then we graduated and there were no jobs. So I did a lot of things. I worked for some nonprofits, pretty much for free. And then like after this period, I had gone and worked with a conservation corps in Montana where I like made no money, but could like, get some housing and stuff there. And then when that was done, I had to move in with my parents in this like uh I think it was also a 12th house year. I may be misremembering that, but I had to move home. They had moved to Florida in the meantime, so I had no friends, nobody I really knew around them. Um, and then as my Jupiter return started, I was like working my ass off to get out of their house and to get a job. And I was able to get myself back to Minnesota where all of my friends were just with like this like part-time job where I could like transfer up there and I had saved up this money and then but I knew I only had enough money for like the summer. And when I came back up here, I was like, if I don't make it, then I'll have to move back in with my parents again. But I took like this leap, um, worked my ass off, got here, and within a week of my Jupiter return, I got a job at like a nonprofit that was like full benefits, like fully paid. Still wasn't making a ton of money, but it was like um this amazing thing that and like the timing is crazy. But it was not fun. It was kind of fun in that it was an adventure, but it was like not easy, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. It's like a shit ton of hard work and a lot of struggle. I was working two jobs through that whole summer, but at the same time it was like this is like I made this happen and I don't know. I think there's something there too about like the participatory nature of it. It's not like Jupiter just comes and like hands you something. Like maybe sometimes like there will be transits maybe like that, but I think more often than not, it's like, no, you need to put in your piece too to like make the magic happen. I don't know if that feels true to your experience, but
Oh, 100%. 100%. I think it's Jupiter is like a helping hand in that case, but it's like it's luck meets preparation. Like that's the lucky part about Jupiter. And if you're not ready and you don't take that hand, the invitation, then it's like, okay, well, then it's gone. Like I'm gonna offer it to somebody else. So it really does require participation. And I love what you said. I mean, you just said you take a leap, but so often we say I took a leap of faith. That's Jupiter. And that is extremely brave and courageous. Makes so much sense with your Jupiter in Aries, to be completely honest. Um, but that is Jupiter. Like it rewards the taking the leap of faith and going towards something that is not really tangible, right? Because faith and belief, like I can tell you how that looks like. I can tell you maybe how it feels like for me, but I can't really prove it to you. But there is something that feels rewarding about doing it, about like taking that leap. Um, for sure. Hmm. Yeah. Do you have anything to add to that? Or otherwise, I think we can maybe talk a bit about the fall of Jupiter.
Yeah, no, let's talk about that.
Okay, well, Jupiter has its fall in the opposite sign of Cancer, which is going to be Capricorn. Uh, which I think that makes sense when we look at the where we're kind of at right now, the threshold between going from Sagittarius season to Capricorn season, which also feels a bit abrupt, right? And it's like, boom, Capricorn. Both of the malefics are doing extremely well here. So, of course, Jupiter wouldn't do so well in the sign of Capricorn.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think again, I think it's similar to like the Mercury Jupiter thing and the mutable signs. It's like I personally don't feel like Jupiter in Capricorn is like as difficult maybe as like maybe even the moon in Capricorn.
Mm.
Um, I feel like when I see that, I get excited. Like I think Jupiter, the Saturn sign is like, whoa, like now they have Saturn's tools to really do something. And like it's kind of like this world builder. Like they got the vision and then they got the Saturn piece to like carry out the vision. But I do think from maybe like the beliefs perspective, that's maybe where Jupiter in Capricorn would struggle a little bit about like you know, I think Capricorn is kind of the what is the word? I lost it. They're kind of like the non-believer, right? Like they're the skeptic. That's the word,
Mhm.
I think. So Jupiter there is kind of like maybe a little less likely to take those risks or a little less likely um to do the believing piece that is really necessary for this the success. Um Yeah. Yeah, and a little bit like I love Capricorns. I think they get a bad rap, but there are some stereotypes about them maybe being a little stingy or like, a little more careful with their resources and like Jupiter's nature is a little more like you can have whatever like Oprah like
Yeah.
on like giving everything away. And so I think, Jupiter doesn't really get to do that maybe when they're in Capricorn.
Yeah, I th when I think of Jupiter and Capricorn, like the first archetype that comes to my mind is like Scrooge.
Yeah.
So, and at the
Rich.
end of the day, like he has a change of mind because
Right.
of the and it's so funny. Like you made a post about that like quite recently, right? About the ghosts of Christmas or however
Yeah.
they're called.
Yes.
So yeah, but I do think Scrooge has definitely a very Saturnine component to it, but same as you said, it's with Jupiter, it makes sense that it's not that hard because Jupiter at the end of the day is still a benefic planet. So despite it being in Capricorn, it has and planets and fall, they are at the bottom. And it's like the only place that you can go after you've hit rock bottom is up. And so it's almost like when we look at that story and Scrooge kind of hits that rock bottom and he realizes and he reflects and he's like, oh shit, like that's where I'm gonna end up with if I keep on doing what I'm doing. And then he has that change of heart. And he still rises up. And I feel like that's kind of a bit of the journey of Jupiter in Capricorn.
Yeah, I love that. That's just on the nose. I think it's like, yeah, also having like, yeah, Scrooge just having all these resources and feeling like they can't share any of them, right?
Hmm.
And the change of heart too. Yeah. Being able to change your mind, I think is a very Jupiterian thing.
Yeah. And again, as we talked a bit about before, it's the protective quality. So it's almost I feel like with Capricorn, because it's like the territory of Saturn and Mars, and there is almost a bit of like fear, I think, around Jupiter, around like generosity, because it almost feels like if I give what is left for me, which makes sense, and I'm also not trying to down talk on Capricorn, like heck yeah, I love Capricorn, have my own Capricorn placements. But like when we think of Jupiter as an archetype there, I can see it making sense, especially because we enter that like first sign of the winter. And it's like, well, the rations are like getting shorter. We kind of need to be protective during that time. So Jupiter kind of falls short here because it's not like if you don't have the resources, obviously in the story Scrooge does, um, but some of us maybe don't, right? And it's good to be a bit protective and frugal as well, which is not what Jupiter does extremely well. So of course it doesn't do so well in Capricorn, but it has a different component. And planets in fall and detriment always get usually very creative about how they are solving issues that come natural to when the planets are in domicile or exaltation.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's the best way to describe like the detriment or the or fall is like those planets have to be creative. And honestly, that's like where we see things like really cool things are what happens when that when that happens, right? Like in birth charts, even like the people who are game changers or like, the people that we admire, a lot of them do have these placements that like are a little bit non-traditional and that's the way that they're able to come up with these solutions that no one else can really think of. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, not to get too ahead of myself with like connecting to the planets, but one way you certainly can connect to the planets, or if you have a planet in fall or however, is through charity. And Jupiter certainly is a very good planet to do charity. And with Jupiter in Capricorn, I'm just thinking of it's like, and that's what happens in that story and that change of heart is like what happens if I do share and if I do give away a bit of my resources to people in need? And then you realize, oh, the word isn't so grim and like maybe I can give my resources and then I get invited and it's actually such an abundant world. But it is like it's not the default mode of Capricorn and Capricorn season, but it can happen. And that's kind of probably the journey of Jupiter and Capricorn, or what natives with Jupiter and Capricorn can do to kind of like mitigate that harshness. And like funnily enough, that is a leap of faith that you need to be willing to take and trust that if I give out, like I will also get returns as well. So interesting.
Totally. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking as you were saying it. It's like the faith that humanity in humanity or that like
Hmm.
and come back to you. Yeah, Cancer being the sign of like the people, the moon, I think really being of the people and ruling Cancer is
Mm.
like a really good way of looking at that dichotomy too of like Capricorn kind of being a little more closed off or something and then like yeah. Mhm.
Yes. Do you want to say, or is there anything else that comes to your mind when we think about Jupiter and Capricorn?
Hmm.
Not that there needs to be, but just before we like move on, if there's anything you want to add.
No, I think we got it.
Great, because now we're going to talk a bit about basic stuff, which is not going to be so long. But it's that we always kind of talk a bit about sects here, just because I think it is important, and sect literally meaning grouping. And Jupiter belongs to the day sect, so it's a diurnal planet, which means that if you happen to have a day chart, which means if you were either born during the day or your sun is above your ascendant and descendant line, you're gonna have a day chart, which means that you are part of the urinal sect, I guess. And there we have Jupiter is the greater benefic of that sect, and Saturn is the lesser malefic of that sect. So for people that do have day charts, usually Jupiter transits can be more significantly life-changing is maybe a good word to use here. And like Venus transit, which is the other benefic planet, maybe aren't as deeply, profoundly changing. Yes, but like Jupiter transits can have a different impact, or even in your chart, it's like you would look at Jupiter and what Jupiter is doing if you have a day chart. But again, it can be activated through perfection years and other timing techniques. So definitely don't just go by that, but that is a fact that I do want to note here. Do you want to add anything to that?
I don't know that I have much to add. I think you covered it. No.
Yes, because then again, very basic, but yeah, we can talk a bit, I think a bit more about like Jupiter as a benefic planet. We already touched a bit about we already touched upon this a bit before when we were talking about Jupiter and Cancer, of course. But just like a bit of the dichotomy, right? Of like what does it mean to be a benefic planet and also maybe the dark side of being a benefic planet and what that entails, because again, it's not just good. Jupiter in Cancer can just as much be about nationalism and tribalism.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think if we look at like the etymology, right? Like benefic and malefic, like the ben prefix kind of being beneficial, right? Like helpful in some kind of way. And then like the mal with the malefic being kind of like difficult or yeah, but I think that like sure, we've talked a lot about like hope and abundance and like this maybe like optimism or something that's associated with Jupiter, but I think it's also really helpful to talk about the dichotomy between malefic and benefic as like Saturn and Mars being on the malefic side more as like taking away or reducing, and then the benefics kind of being like additive in a
Mm.
way of where it's a little bit more neutral language of like it's not so just like good and bad, right? Like I think it can be good when Saturn like limits us and is like, no, you're not doing that. Um, so yeah, I think like Jupiter, it's like the greater benefic, it wants to make things bigger, it wants to increase, it wants to add things. Um, Providing opportunities versus yeah what the malefics are doing. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think I like what you said because in a way it's like we need planets to describe experiences in our lives. And I also don't like using good, bad, positive, negative. Um, I like what you said about like benefics kind of being here as a force that adds things to life, which for the most part speaks about experiences that are usually more pleasant to us, and the malefics doing the opposite, kind of invoking or talking about the experiences that are usually more unpleasant to us. But like in the long scheme of things, it's never like we don't really know if an event is fortune or misfortune in that moment or in the long run or what it does. And again, certainly also what I said before, it's like sometimes Jupiter can hit us and it can be overwhelming because it's like, whoa, I can suddenly imagine my life going somewhere and maybe I'm coming from like an extremely depressive period in my life. And that is, like in some way, like sure, it's very pleasant, but it's like, whoa, it's overwhelming at first. And that is equally Jupiter as well. And the possibilities that can come can easily like kind of sweep us off our feet. And if we're not ready, can almost kind of be our downfall. I mean, certainly when we look at charts with people that have Jupiter in Cancer, they sometimes didn't have the easiest life, and I'm thinking of like the 11th house episode that I did with Hawk, and we were talking like Kurt Cobain has Moon Jupiter in Cancer in 11th house, which like when you see that, like when an astrologer sees that, you would be like, oh, beautiful. But what ended up with him is he rose to fame way more quickly than he wanted to, than he anticipated to, which led to him being completely overwhelmed by receiving so much love and care from people, which wasn't like easy at the end of the day. And that's Jupiter as well. Like it can expand you way too fast, way out of your comfort zone than you're ready for in that moment. So that's being the greater benefic too.
It's yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking as you're talking about this too, like Jupiter has a lot of and by transit can have a lot of associations with like pregnancy, like you've mentioned a little bit. And so just thinking about that, like obviously there's the childbirth analogy, but then also just like having a kid is like I can speak from experience, like having a baby is one of the greatest things that can happen to you. And it's like one of the like hardest things that can happen to you. It's like the greatest gift, and also it's a lot of fucking work. So yeah, I think yeah.
Agreed. And I think I cannot speak from experience, but I guess I can just ask you or what I've heard from a lot of mothers. There's also a lot of like grief and happiness involved in the process where it's like you're like letting go of your former life and it's like sad and exciting at the same time. But maybe you can, from personal experience, talk a bit more about that because I don't want to project
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of that. It really does speak to the exaltation, I think, in Cancer too. It's like, again, like I know I've said it already, but like the memory piece too of like, oh, when you become a parent, all of a sudden you're like thinking about like how you were raised too. And it like
Mhm.
brings up all of these very confronting things that like you don't maybe even realize until you're like, oh, like, is that how am I gonna do this? Like, am I gonna do the same things or like yeah, it's like maybe it also kind of speaks to Jupiter's connotations of being like the teacher, right? Of like
Mm.
transits, like yes, they are mostly positive or if we're talking about things that way. But then there's like a lesson to be learned too, typically. Like Jupiter is a teacher at heart. And lessons aren't always like, oh, you learn something by like reading it. Like oftentimes it's learning by going through an experience that is inherently difficult and coming out the other side, like, okay, now I've learned.
Yeah, and I like how pregnancy or I guess when the child is born, it's literally an expansion of your family that you're doing, which is like such key terminology to Jupiter. So I think there is a component of yeah, what do you want to expand on? And then you question yourself like, do I want to expand on how I was raised? Do I want to do the same things? Do I want to give them the same beliefs? Right? That's also a Jupiter word. What views, world views do I want to like feed my children? Yeah, that's definitely Jupiterian territory.
Mhm. Yeah, even like I don't know, there's something like solar about this of like the lineage or like the patrilineage, but then also I think I'm losing my train of thought. But like I don't know. I think I lost it. We can-
Was it maybe something of like the just like the expansion of the lineage and the continuation or something like that?
Yeah, I think there's that. Um Yeah. Maybe also like the passing on of like the wisdom too of like the
Hmm.
lineage of like that the teacher and like stepping into that role as like becoming a parent and like not only, carrying on traditions or things like that from your family, but again, like you kind of mentioned, like passing on what beliefs do I want to um give to my children or my lineage.
Yeah, and I think that's usually one of the things that is hot debatable in families and and you know your parents or like right because it's like again there's like a lot of lineage that comes into play here and it can be very like a hot topic during like oh why are you doing it like that why are you suddenly want to change that so I do think yeah beliefs opinions can be very yeah, polarizing in that way and what we do with them. And certainly speaks of the quality of Jupiter as well, which Jupiter does rule structures, which I think is usually a word we associate with Saturn, and certainly Saturn for sure rules structures as well. But Jupiter rules our belief structures and also ruled over like governments and laws and all of that. Like we usually think of like Libra and the law, but like we we forget that like Jupiter has a lot to do with our law system because it is based upon what we believe is just or unjust, which is totally the realm of Jupiter. And the way that our like society is structured is based upon our beliefs on like is this country Christian or any sort of other religion, right? It's like everything is based around that. Like this gives us our structure and how we're operating, how we're functioning, what holidays we're celebrating or not celebrating. So Jupiter 100% has to do with like the structures of our day-to-day lives and what we believe in and how we function as as a society. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and like what we're choosing. Yeah. I think I'm also, sorry, I'm going back a little bit, but like thinking
No
back
worries.
to like teacher, like, and what, um, as let's just say, even like as an astrology student, like choosing your teacher and like that being such a big Jupiterian thing, like a lot of times that happens with like a Jupiter transit or a perfection year. Um, but I think it's really interesting also talking about like the myth of Jupiter, and maybe we're getting ahead here, but like how Jupiter is, and maybe I'm gonna butcher this, so, but like, Jupiter's father is Saturn, and so like, he eventually like defeats his father. But so there's like something there though about like what you're choosing to keep from your lineage, whether that's like your actual like family or your chosen teachers, and like what you're not gonna keep and what you're gonna, I don't know, cut away and move forward. I don't know if that's going anywhere for you, but
No, that's no, I think it totally makes sense with also again Jupiter exaltation in the realm of Cancer of the sign that is kind of associated with like family and lineage in that way as well or just ancestry. And I would say that, right? Like it's I mean, it definitely shapes your whole worldview depending on which type of belief system you have been raised with and how you operate in the world, it totally like influences every single action you do, depending on what belief you have of how the world functions. Um, we don't really have to necessarily get into all the religions here right now, but like certainly like if you're growing up with maybe a religion where it's like, oh, you have been born a sinner and and you're here to right your sins, you're gonna go about your day and how you do things very differently than somebody that maybe grew up with I don't know, I'm talking about myself here, but like with a more like spiritual worldview where it's like talking more about karma and not necessarily like, oh, you have been born a sinner. At least like that's how I noticed in my personal life how different I am from my surroundings because I have a completely different worldview and the way that I like operate in the world. And that's kind of how we see the differences, and it can really shape you, right? Like when you choose your teacher, they're gonna influence you for the rest of your life, like good teachers, which is which is Jupiter. Jupiter figures often represent teachers, gurus, priesters, and in many small villages, maybe not cities, but like small villages, there's still like the church or something that's like symbolic of that still have a lot of power. And people still like put a lot of power into these like priests and teachers and popes or whatever. So it's there for sure.
totally.
I don't know if you want to expand on that. I mean, we can also kind of talk a bit about the Jupiter in mythology thing,
Yeah,
if
I
you
think if
want
you want
to.
to, yeah, you want to kick us off on that?
Uh, I don't know if I can.
Okay.
No, just because just because I feel like my mythology radar is like not the best. You know, it's interesting here in the Swiss school system. We had a lot of like Roman mythology, but not so much Greek mythology at all. So it feels like I sometimes fall a bit shortly on that. But if you uh can expand on that, like I
Mine's a
feel like
little
I could
bit.
just not do it justice, you know. But we can try to do our best. So if anyone is listening and like you have a major in Greek mythology, like I guess we both apologize, but we're gonna try our best.
Sure. So I think my understanding, mine is not great either.
Of
America,
course.
the school systems in general. But I think that Kronos or Saturn was like the father of Jupiter and then some of the other Titans, I think, and then ate his children. And then, but then Jupiter defeated his father and kind of like was successful in that endeavor and was and then ends up being kind of like the god of all of the gods because of this. What's your understanding?
Yeah, I mean, okay, the first of all, the names, right? Like we're talking about like Kronos, which is Saturn here, and Zeus. Uh I never know how to pronounce it in English, but like Zeus here that resembles Jupiter. And certainly there are many tales, and you know, I grew up with watching Hercules, so my understanding of Zeus was like very much linked to that story. And then later on, I realized that Zeus was like a very big like philanthropist uh, with everything, which kind of is a bit of the Jupiterian realm as well, and certainly maybe also a bit of like the shadow side of Jupiter, where it's like the fall of Jupiter can almost be a bit like you're too comfortable with things.
Hmm.
Like everything, life is just kind of good. So what should I do? Like I'd rather just drink wine and have fun with the ladies or whatever than do anything else. Because like, why would I? Like, why would I change if I don't have to? I think that can definitely be present in the myth. And another figure that people also associate oftentimes with Jupiter is Dionysus, which is the god of wine, interestingly enough. So I think there is that component here that we see with also like the benefic quality of Jupiter, but also the a bit of like the cautionary tale of what happens if you just focus on having fun and chilling, which you know sometimes is also what we associate with certainly with Sagittarius and with Pisces, in like a shadow aspect of like, oh yeah, they're just having fun, they're not caring about like actually doing something.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I also think like going back to Zeus too is like this figure that has kind of been in like more modern times, right? Like portrayed as like the guy with the white hair and he's kind of like in charge. And to me, I think it's like been a like whitewashing or like Christian washing of like this figure of like where it's kind of like the old man in the sky, right? That like
Hmm.
Christianity has kind of like taken on. And so I do think that Jupiter can get the nuance of Jupiter can get lost in that a little bit of like, oh, he's like, you know, the capital G God of Christianity that like can grant wishes essentially. And maybe there's like some of that sprinkled in there, but I think the a more accurate description would be including like some of these shadow sides and yeah, some of the other layers to this character for sure.
Yeah, and this is not entirely going into that, but kind of, but not talking about God, but also uh, the Son of God, Jesus, which has a very similar ring to Jupiter, is definitely a Jupiterian figure for sure in how we look at it, if he actually existed or not. Like, you know, certainly as an archetype, I find it extremely fascinating to look at Jesus. From my upbringing, since it was not Christian infused at all, I feel like I could go to that like in a more definitely in a way where it wasn't like scary for me. And like the first time that I heard like the whole story of Jesus, like it really touched me on like a deep level, to be completely honest. And I found it very beautiful. But obviously, you know, what came afterwards, and that's maybe like what Jupiter wants to avoid, but inevitably happens with our belief systems, is they become institutionalized, and that's never the fun part about it. I think the core, like Jesus as an archetype, very mystical. Like a lot of the things that he preaches, that's like in the book, the Bible, which I haven't really read to be completely honest, but is like the fact that this book over thousands of years and still continues to shape so much of our world, what we think is just or unjust, what we think is correct or not correct. Like that is talking about the immense power of Jupiter and being a teacher, even if it's an archetype. Um, like so much weight.
Mhm. Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think something that the things you're saying for me, what it's kind of bringing up is like the Temperance card for the card for
Mm.
Sagittarius and tarot, and like how I've been thinking about that card a lot because sometimes I'm like that I don't like that for like Sagittarius because it feels a little bit like a compared to some of the other cards for signs, it feels like a little bit of a it feels prescriptive, I think, where it's like,
Mm.
oh, Sagittarius should be like moderate. Like when we think about the meaning of that card, a lot of times you'll hear people say the word moderation or something. And part of me is like, well, no, like how come Scorpio gets the death card? Like they get to like double down on like who they are, but then this like other temperance card wants you to like sober up or something if you're a Sagittarius. But I think in spending time with it, I start to see that it's actually more for me about um like tempering yourself, and it's about the duality really, I think. And going back to like I just keep thinking of like Jesus like turning the other cheek when somebody like slaps him or something, and it's like that is a Jupiterian nature too. You know, there's the fighting side, but there's the nature to not immediately strike back or to, you know, it's to kind of like see the bigger picture of like, well, do I want to start a war here or do I want to um you know, move forward in a better way? And that's like maybe not responding with the way same way that you've been treated or um yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
I mean, Jupiter comes after Mars in the Chaldean order, so so it's almost as if it's like the next step. If Mars is like a lot of our instinctual nature and like coming from a place of like, ooh, I'm gonna do, Jupiter is almost like, okay, I'm gonna think beyond that. Like, what happens if I wait a second, sleep over it a day, and not immediately act upon things? Because again, Jupiter isn't so much about acting, I feel like. It's more about trusting, which is not to say that it's like trusting isn't necessarily a inactive process. I think it's actually a very active process, but it's invisible. And I think invisibility is maybe not the first word that you would associate with Jupiter, but I certainly think it is there because Jupiter to me is very intangible. And it's, of course, it's like the gassy planet. Like it's kind of intangible, literally up in the sky as well. And I think that's a lot of what Jupiter does. I mean, what Jupiter also literally does is kind of protecting our Earth from meteors and hitting them. And so Jupiter kind of serves as that protective force in our own lives as well. But, and that's probably also the lucky component of Jupiter. But it's hard to tell because if you don't know what you have been protected from, you don't like maybe you're not even that grateful for it because you don't know that like we don't even know right now how many meteors Jupiter has protected us from entering the earthly realm and wreaking havoc. So it's like how many experiences in your life have would have maybe turned out way worse if Jupiter wasn't like here to serve as a sort of force of protection. So I like to think of it this way, but in that way, it's like it's very hard to like grasp Jupiter and what Jupiter is doing. It's often like almost a bit foggy, even though certainly foggy is more like a Neptunian word. but just very like unreachable. Like we can't fully like feel what Jupiter is like fully doing in our lives. Yeah, I don't know if what you maybe have to say or add to that.
Yeah, I think one thing coming up, the first thing is the fact that it's the longer transit, right? So it's like a year
Mhm.
of Jupiter in a sign. So it's a little bit more of like something happening in the background. And then with that, it's kind of like I think of it very much as like a vibe or something where like quite lit, you think of Pisces and they're always talking about the vibe, where it's kind of this intangible thing of like this like feeling that you have. It's like very hard to describe. It can change very easily. It is like a gas, like you're saying, where it's like it's a little bit immaterial. Um, and then there's something. Um, sorry, my brain.
All good.
Um, yeah, I think the vibe and then so there was something I wanted to bring up for sure that I thought was so interesting on one of the astrology podcast episodes where Chris Brennan had Grace Morris, this like financial astrologer on there, and she was talking about the stock market and trends, and Jupiter is always who they look to for like what stocks are going to be hot that year. So like
Mhm.
with Jupiter and Cancer, it's like healthcare and like caring for people, anything about like families or children, like those are going to be things that might do well that year financially. This is not financial advice. There's more to the story, but like that can kind of highlight like the trends and like I think that's a really good way of adding a layer of your understanding to Jupiter is kind of like what are going to be the hot topics like this year and yeah, it kind of always has a way of delivering that, with Jupiter and Gemini is a lot about like communication and technology and like air travel, transportation, those kinds of things. So we can kind of see it's a good vibe check like what's going on like even just looking at like the element that Jupiter's in it's like gonna can tell you a lot about what the vibe might be like and I think there's another thing too with like it ruling a fire sign and a water sign like these are the two most intangible like elements. I mean air, okay, air is intangible too, but there's like more of the rationale or the like more tangible thoughts or something associated with that, but like we can't really like logic our way through like emotions and feelings and we can't really logic our way through like these like gut instincts that like the fire signs bring. So yeah, I think you're onto something with like the gaseous planet and like this it's like yeah, it's the vibe. I think it's the best way to sum it up.
Yeah, a faint vibe in the back. I do feel like it is like that. It almost feels like the best way I could say it in like modern terms, I don't know, is like a protective angel or something. Like that's kind of what Jupiter feels like a bit. Um, where it's like, yeah, like sometimes you don't really know what you're being protected from, but it's also again, and that's why Jupiter is like in water, it does well, because like intuition. It's not really logical, but it probably saves you from a lot of stuff that you would have otherwise done. So you better listen to that. Even though it's something that isn't really explainable, it doesn't make it any more or less like real in how it functions in real life with a lot of things. And yeah, gassy planet. I was just thinking, it's so interesting how when you think of fire and water, like where Jupiter does well, certainly like water can you can put out the fire with the water, but together, put them together and like put the gas component together and you heat up that water with that fire, like that's a lot. That's like how they work together in a very good way. Yeah, so I feel like I don't actually know what I want to say with this, but it was just like a th train of thought that I was like, that makes sense in this context for some reason.
No, I love it.
So, hello everyone. We're back from a small little break. We're going to continue talking about our lovely benefic planet Jupiter. And I feel like we left off like just somewhere, but the next topic I think that's worth talking about is Jupiter having its joy in the 11th house and what that means because that means a lot of things. I feel like the 11th house itself is so broad. Definitely has a Jupiterian flavor to it. So, yeah, do you want to start off on that and then we can expand on it?
Yeah, so in the planetary joy schema, Jupiter rejoices in the 11th house, and the 11th house is all about like your networks, your like groups and communities that you kind of belong to, more in like a broader sense. Like I wouldn't say that these are like your closest friends or like the people you see every day necessarily, but like another good word would be like your audience. And then there's also something there though that I think is like very Jupiterian, that's like your goals and your ambitions and things that you want to like be seen out in the world. So um yeah, I think that's kind of like maybe a good way to kick that off. Do you have other things that you like to add to the 11th house?
Yeah, I mean, those are certainly 11th house topics. One topic or word that we can also associate with the 11th house is benefactors. Um, and I think these are like when people talk about groups and all of that, it's yes, but it's a lot of times it's as you said, not people you're necessarily close to, but people that you associate with and that usually it's like what are the people that you're going to associate with? It's the people that have the same vision and dreams and beliefs as you because they're going to propel you to where you want to go, and that's that like Jupiter rejoicing in that 11th house. And sometimes when Jupiter is transiting your natal 11th house, what can happen is that this benefactor quality comes in, which is Jupiter, and you meet someone and that person then introduces you to maybe a friend group or a job or something that it's like it doesn't come from you, but it's because you know the right people that you get the things in life that otherwise maybe you wouldn't have. And like that's the benefactor quality of Jupiter right there. And like just knowing the right people, right? Which is kind of like the luck, right? Like being at the right place at the right time, but also taking and embracing that opportunity that is maybe given to you. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I love juxtaposing the houses from the one opposite them too, and like how the 11th house is opposite from the fifth house. And so oftentimes like the fifth house is this like creative practice or these things like we're making more in private, it's below like the horizon line in the chart.
Hmm.
And then the 11th house is like the opposite of that. It's like where those things maybe come into the public context for other people maybe to consume or to see, um, and like who's there in that part of your life. Whether that's like I don't know, because the fifth house can be many things, right? It can be like your paintings or your writing, or it can be like your children. And then like the 11th house, I think, oh, like I find that a lot with my kids now. It's like I end up hanging out with these other people that like maybe aren't my friends, but are like other parents of like the friends of my kids. And so yeah, it's kind of like your what is it, your known associates or or something like that. But yeah, the benefactors thing is huge. Like, who are the people that are like interested in what you're creating or what you're putting out into the world?
Yeah, when you made that comparison, what I was thinking of, like, okay, yeah, the fifth house is the art you're creating at your home and like the paintings, and then the 11th house is the realm of where it's like the art exhibition where it's hanging in. And how did you get there? Well, probably through knowing some people or they discovering you. And oftentimes these venues actually serve as a place where people can discover you and your art. So and that's really like the realm of that 11th house. And yeah. And again, it's also what I mentioned before, right? It's sometimes Jupiter moves through that 11th house or other planets move through that 11th house. But and it's like what kind of happens? It's your maybe your visions of what you want for your future changes. Naturally, what happens, or for a lot of people happens, is you're like, do I want to have these people around in my life if they're not kind of contributing to that larger vision that I want for me or like that changed right now? And then we probably want to associate maybe with different people, right? And again, let's not forget like the 11th house isn't like that close one-to-one relationships like we have in that seventh house. So I would say it's not like if you separate from these people and associations, usually maybe it's not that harsh. Although if you are separating maybe from larger spiritual groups or beliefs that have were shaping your life, that can obviously be a bit more uh how would I say it? Like a cutthroat experience in your life in that regard. But that is definitely Jupiter, right? And it's almost like an invitation of like dream bigger, expand bigger, have that vision in your life.
Mhm. Yeah, and for people like newer to astrology too, like rejoicing is kind of like an accidental dignity where
Mhm.
it's like it's different than, how we talked about detriment and fall, where yeah, it's just a different type of way of looking at a planet and how well it's doing in a chart. So let's say, you do have your 11th house is Capricorn if you're a Pisces rising, and you have Jupiter there, like, or it's transiting there, it might like get a little boost from being in its joy there versus like if it were in a different house where it wouldn't have any special kind of,
Mm.
so yeah.
Yeah, I just realized that I'm like that makes sense for Pisces rising ruled by Jupiter that they would have Capricorn 11th house, and so when Jupiter moves there, which so it's yeah, wow. Pisces risings definitely are lucky in that regard. Um yeah, and to bring another example, which like I kind of covered that when I did the 11th house episode with Hawk, but we were talking about like Kurt Cobain's chart because again he literally has a constellation of like Jupiter and Moon in Cancer in the 11th house. You would be like, wow, amazing. Um, and it almost functioned like too well in the regard that he is still remembered. He's still so beloved by the people. The vision that he created for the people, like it's still present so much to this day. And what he did for the fact that like his life in and of itself wasn't that long. Like sadly, he didn't live that long, right? But the impact he had, the people that he influenced, the love they still have for him, like that's a benefic being first of all in its exaltation and also in its joy in the 11th house. And and it didn't help him specifically see himself as a better person, right? Like that's I guess the sad part about all of that. But that's like what we can see, right? Like the people made him who he is, and like he rose to fame so quickly. Um, Again, the Jupiterian expansion. So I definitely also like want to highlight that part as well here, where like if you have Jupiter in such a good position in your chart, it can like it does its thing, but it's like it almost does it like too good, where it's like, whoa, like everything is so easy and that's the part where like it's interesting when we look at like the malefic planets because like the malefics they rule over like the oppositions and the squares and there's always challenges with them or like holding opposites. Trines are like bam, here you have it. What can happen with this is we don't feel worthy receiving it because we like didn't work hard for it. And that's kind of I guess what happened in his life. Um Again, I don't know. Like I don't know. I'm not Kurt Cobain. I haven't lived his life, but I feel like that was a lot of his struggle where it was like the fame just came too quickly, like too easy. There was almost like no real struggle behind it, which certainly can make oneself feel a bit overwhelmed and almost like, well, why does it not happen for other people? Like that's a bit of that lucky component, and it can, yeah, not everyone handles that the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something there too with like exalted planets getting like pedestalized in a way that's just like not comfortable for anyone, where like I have a friend who has a Pisces Venus, and so it's exalted in like the seventh house, and it's like,
Mm.
people just always like ex have these higher expectations for them. Um, it adds like a pressure, I think, that other people don't really maybe get when they don't have that. Um, so yeah, I keep thinking of the phrase too that's like it's almost like fixed star coded with, or the royal star coded, where it's like with great power comes great responsibility, and that it's like a two-sided coin, where these good things can happen, but there's like this other side to it that um is not often, it can be overlooked, I think.
For sure, yeah. And I think these you know, maybe like 11th second house activation would maybe be something like winning the lottery. A lot of people that win the lottery freaking overwhelmed by by all of a sudden having that much more money and opportunities in their lives. Not everyone, of course, but that's exactly my point, right? It's like not everyone handles that component when that expansion comes in life the same way. And for many people, it can be almost like a downfall moment where it's like, I can't handle the too goodness. And that is planets in exaltation, right? If planets in its fall are at the bottom and the only way from the bottom is up, well, planets of exaltation are here. And it's almost like, well, the only place where you can go from here is down. Um, and I don't even mean that in a bad way, but that's like the pressure, right? Where it's like you're here already, so people have these expectations of you, and that can be very hard to handle for these individuals for sure, especially at a young age where maybe they haven't lived through so much of life yet. Yeah, that can, it's almost like when it's too easy, it makes us feel uneasy because it's like, what? I can just have it. There's no, like, I don't need to work hard for it. Um, so it's almost like, ironically, there's like this belief system that we have to kind of get over with, where it's like, I can actually just receive the goodness in my life.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's so interesting too. Like in Kurt Cobain in particular, it's like so much of that fifth house space of what you're creating is so private and so personal, and so like, it's kind of, the fifth house is more about a place that is just for you and like what you find fun or what you find attractive. And then like when you put it up in that 11th house space, it's like that's hard. Like it's very private, and then to like have it on blast, and then to be like, known across the world for it, like, yeah, it's not an easy axis, even though it's rejoicing, I would say.
Yeah, especially for someone that never really wanted that level of fame in the first place. But that's exactly that, right? Like it's expansion, but like almost a bit too much. And it's really what I'm just thinking of, like a lot of the spiritual practices I did. I don't do them so much anymore, but it's like you meditate to be comfortable that when that moment of expansion comes in, that you can like handle it, that your nervous system can handle it because it's a lot. Like it's like really our nervous systems are kind of not really trained to hold all of that. And so a lot of like spiritual practices and teachings, when we do like that boring part of like sitting, contemplating and like expanding our mind, we're doing that to prepare ourselves for these moments that when they come into our lives that we actually have the capacity to yeah, hold that. Otherwise, it can be painful or, again, overwhelming, which is certainly what Jupiter often does in our lives. It overwhelms us. It overwhelms us a bit. And I think this is something I talked with a friend about like many, many years ago. But I feel like it's so Jupiterian and very much like 11th house coded, where we have a dream, we have a wish, we have a vision, and we're like, how can I manifest that? Whatever. And then we're questioning like, why is it not happening? And I always like to tell people that Jupiter wants for you, like Jupiter wants these good things to happen in your life for you. But right now, you'd probably be overwhelmed. Like let's take the example of putting your art in an art gallery. Like maybe you want that, but right now, would you be able to handle putting your art in an art gallery and having people there and somebody being like, I'm gonna pay $2,000 for that artwork? And so Jupiter, what Jupiter kind of does is like, I want to get that wish to you, but I want to make sure that you get there and you can actually hold that when that opportunity comes into your life, which then, and that's the teaching part of Jupiter is like, okay, you have to go through these lessons and then you're going to have the capacity for that. So I definitely feel like that's also very 11th house
Mhm.
story as well. Yeah. So do you have anything to say to that or?
No, I would agree. I think, yeah, I think I don't think I have anything to add.
Yeah, let me just, is there anything else to the 11th house? Well, yeah, not particularly. Again, I mean, there's for people listening, there's a whole episode I did specifically on just the 11th house. So if you want like to just listen to the 11th house, like there's you can go listen to that episode where we delved much deeper into that and also much deeper into Kurt Cobain's chart. So at this point, we can maybe talk about the Jupiter cycles, which there's like three parts to that, and we can decide which one we want to talk first and second and third. One of them is Jupiter returns. That's when Jupiter returns to the place it was when you were born. We have that around every 12 years. Then we have something that happens every year. Well, both of these things. Jupiter goes retrograde every year, and Jupiter conjoins with the sun, aka has a Cazimi moment, a rebirthing moment with the sun, and that's part of like Jupiter's synodic cycle. So, yeah. What turns you on to talk about first?
Sure. Let's just start with the returns, I think. Like so that happens every 12 years. So the first one is when you're 12. Oftentimes, this is the last year before you kind of become a teenager, but you're kind of probably well into like puberty, I would say at that point for most people. So it's kind of like, in his back in history, that would have really been when you were becoming actually like an adult or considered more of an adult. Um, in more recent times, you have a little bit more time than that to get it figured out. But yeah, I think it's definitely like if you think of 12 years old, that's like stepping into a new phase for sure, whether that's teenage years or adulthood historically. Um, yeah, there's like a sense of wisdom kind of that comes with that. I think in a lot of like faith traditions, like this is around the age when you would like go on like uh some type of what is the word I'm looking for, like spiritual journey or like some type of ritual would happen where you're kind of like welcomed into adulthood. Um yeah, it's I don't know. What do you have to add to this?
I mean, I certainly think that first Jupiter return is like an initiation into adulthood or a new, again, more teenagehood, I guess, but this is kind of like the first step into adulthood. Right? It's like 12 and then you turn 13. So then you become a teenager. And what happens around that time, and that's also where, like, not to get too ahead of myself, but Jupiter, like in medical astrology, ruling over our hormones, it's when our hormones get extremely active all of a sudden. And our bodies literally expand during that time, right? Like we grow, women grow breasts and all of that. Men grow like chest hair. I don't know, all of these things. So our body is expanding during that Jupiter return in a massive way. And again, these hormones start really working. A lot of times, not always, but a lot of girls probably like maybe get their first period around that age, which is also like definitely an initiatory quality. And Yeah, I think maybe what you wanted to say before is like rites of passage, maybe like that. I feel like that's usually what you do when you like step into that phase. Um, and it actually really saddens me that nowadays we don't really do or have that because I think it's so important and I would wish that it would be brought back because I feel like nowadays a lot of people that are in that age, are in that Jupiter return, the way that they then start to seek that expansion if they don't really get a rite of passage is through yeah, through like experimenting with drugs, like expanding your mind, things like that, or maybe I mean intercourse. I don't know, like I don't, it's a very young age, but
Yeah, that's
that
realistic.
certainly is something that is like present around that time and that is like we wanting to explore. Of course it is, because our hormones are running wild.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that my husband and I have talked about a lot with our kids is like wanting to make sure that we do something there or like acknowledging that and like trying to like bring that back in some way. And I'm sure we're not the only ones. But yeah, it definitely is lacking. And then it's interesting too that once we like our second Jupiter return then is like 24, which in modern times actually feels really more like when you're stepping into adulthood, you know.
Yeah,
Technically,
agreed.
a lot of things where I live become more legal when you're 18, but really like we've learned more about like brain development and we know that a lot of people's brains aren't fully developed more until like the 25-year-old range. Maybe that's even been pushed back a little bit. But yeah, I think that's when you really start to get more established, you know, if if you've gone through college in a traditional route, like maybe you've graduated then or nearing the end of your studies, and starting to kind of enter that real world of like having bills and like, you know, like finding your way, more to like financial independence.
Agreed. I think a lot of people also say that 24 is yeah, like almost like a second adolescent age. Um, certainly felt like that for me. I think it was really around that time where I was to be fair, it's also around the time where we do have like our closing Saturn square kind of as well. So that is present as well. But it certainly is, I think, much more the time where we are stepping into a more adult role. And then, of course, the last part of that is hitting our Saturn return throughout the ages of 27 till 30. That's the final initiation into adulthood. And I do think recently I saw on Instagram quite a few posts of researchers pointing to that brain development being pushed back to, yeah,
Mm,
more of the like Saturn return age, which certainly makes a lot of sense, astrology wise.
yeah. Yeah, I think something else that's been like coming up during this conversation is like we also, when we're 12, we enter a first house year. So
True.
it's it's interesting coming off of like the is that right? I'm trying to think because like
I think it is because it's 0 to 1 is
the first, yeah.
I think it is right, but let me check in the wheel, but I do think it is right. Yeah, it's like when we turn, because like 11 is that 12th house perfection year, and then when we turn 12, we enter that first house perfection year. Yes.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I feel like that just says something about your Jupiter return kind of being like a return to yourself or you know, having that coincide at the same time is it's really beautiful. Of course, astrology it's just like works out perfectly that way. Um, but it's interesting too, then coming off of like the 12th house year and like how rough we know that can be, you know, like 23 is talked about a lot for astrologers as being a rough year. And then getting to not only go into a first house year, which it can be good, it can be bad, it can be difficult, right? Like after making that journey from like the 12th house to the first house can be like a little bit tender, I think is a good keyword. Um, but then to have Jupiter your Jupiter return like can be, I think, a little bit of a boost. Um, I'm ruled by Jupiter, so I feel like my view on like Jupiter returns are maybe a little bit rose-colored or uh, you know, and I think that they can get played up more than um they actually do, I guess. I don't know. It all is going to really depend on like where Jupiter is in your chart, like what house it's in, how it's configured to the other planets. But like any return, it's like a start of a new cycle for you personally. And um, I think is that in itself is auspicious or something to like note and to like savor when it happens.
Agreed, yeah. Yeah, and it's also gosh, wait, now I lost my train of thought. I was like I had but Jupiter returns okay, never mind. If I feel like you wanted to say something, so maybe
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that like you can think of it as like being lucky or something like that. And then it can come and it can kind of be like a nothing burger or like, it's also hard. You have to remember that it's the start of a cycle. So it's honestly like a new moon. It's like you don't know really what seed you're planting. It's like a time for intention setting or it's the start of something and it's a dark period. Like when there's a new moon, we don't see the moon. Um so I think there are just some misconceptions that I definitely had when I started learning astrology. It's like, oh, this is going to be great. And then it's kind of like, well, nothing really happened. And I mean, stuff happened, but like
I
you
know what
maybe
you
don't
mean, yeah.
see it until later, like till you get to that first quarter when it starts to become visible, and then maybe the fruit comes out at the opposition. But yeah.
Okay, also what I wanted to say before is also you have a day chart, right? So it's na naturally Jupiter transits will bring more flavor than maybe some Venus transits. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that with Jupiter transits, sometimes we look back and then we realize how good we actually had it. Like we don't see it in the moment. Certainly for me, when that Jupiter in Aries, to be completely honest, was traveling through my sixth house, I actually got like really lucky with where I was working, even though it wasn't like the most easiest time period of my life. But looking back now, I'm like, it was incredible how lucky I got with the team of people that I had and like the work circumstances itself that I had. Like that was such a good period there, which usually it's not so much, right? I have Saturn and Aries there usually like lurking and doing its thing. So I didn't fully realize it in the moment, but looking back now, I can see how Jupiter certainly was acting there and being a benefic planet. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think back to like Jupiter in Aquarius, like transiting my 12th house and like how that was, I feel like I'm off topic now, but um,
No, I think it's
it's
okay.
yeah, it's a dark house and it's like this place of isolation, but like looking back, that was like the most recent one was during COVID, right? And that was actually very good for me in a lot of ways. It was not easy at the time, but it was like it translated into like really getting into astrology, like having that alone time. Jupiter really was like that teacher that came through.
Yeah, yeah, it's when I had my Jupiter return in Aquarius. We're taking the stories from each of our own natal Jupiters. It's so funny. Uh because Janessa has Jupiter in Aries. But my Jupiter return during that time when I was 23, 24 was literally coincided with me learning about astrology and finding my teacher, which is such a that is often something that can happen during your Jupiter return years is you find a new thing to study or a new vision you want to follow or a teacher comes into your life. You're like, that's the person I want to study under and learn from. And And for me, as we talked about before, that was Adam, uh, Adam Allenbus. Even though at that time, still called it Chuta Bavadas, but certainly that for me made so much sense looking back now, especially with Jupiter in Aquarius, a Saturn ruled sign, and it's when I switched from like using more modern psychological astrology to ancient Hellenistic astrology, uh, which was that switch from realizing, oh, Aquarius is kind of also the realm of Saturn and not just the realm of Uranus, as how I initially learned it. Um, so it was really a homecoming in that way of like really understanding my Jupiter and being like, oh, well, it makes so much sense that I studied ancient Hellenistic traditional astrology during my Jupiter return in like this Saturn ruled sign. So it is often a time where like we're learning a lot. Not so much a time where we're like doing something necessarily with that knowledge, but more like sucking it in and like expanding and just being like, woo. Again, like you're find that teacher. It's not yet where you are the teacher or where you do something with it. It's more about like taking it in. Yeah.
Yeah, I think my third Jupiter return, so when I was 36, was I had been studying astrology for about a year, and that was actually when I did work with it. I like started my practice like professionally then and like knew that that was happening. I would probably choose a different election knowing more. But like but yeah, that was when I chose, it was like I'm gonna plant this seed. And I do feel like now I've gotten to the square, and it is starting to kind of come along more than it has been, I would say, in terms of like visibility or kind of it's an opportunity, the square too, for like adjustments and clarifying the vision. But yeah, and actually that brings me to like I think one of the next things we wanted to talk about, the Cazimi, because I think my Jupiter return in Aries was like within a couple days of the Cazimi that year too.
Mm.
So yeah, Jupiter transits around, or the sun transits through every sign every year. So Jupiter's hanging out in one sign for about a year at a time. And then when the sun meets up with Jupiter in like a conjunction, it's actually called the Cazimi. And so this is kind of just that reset point of the cycle, like a new moon for Jupiter
Mm.
in general. You want to add any Cazimi thoughts? Or
Um, if you have more to add to this, please feel free to do so, and then I can say more.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite descriptions of Cazimi is like in the heart of, like, so Jupiter like is in the heart of the sun during that moment, and it's kind of like if you think about it physically in the sky, like Jupiter is actually being like occulted by the sun. Like you can't see Jupiter at that moment, and it's kind of like this secret meeting room or like conversation that's happening that like you don't know what's going on in there. Only those two know. And there's that lack of like visibility, essentially, just similar to a new moon. Um, so yeah, it's kind of like I would say auspicious. Obviously, there's always going to be the context of what's going on around it. Um, but yeah, it's kind of like this in the heart of the sun moment.
Yeah, I think it's and like you said, Jupiter is invisible, but but coincidentally, what happens in the Cazimi, kind of when we look at it from astrology perspective, is that actually the sun gives up its throne briefly for that planet to be on it. So it's actually like it's invisible in the sky, but it actually takes up more importance at that time astrologically. And so again, it is a reset moment. It's like we can, it's like almost we can see that planet like clearly for a brief second, like the true essence of it. I'm certainly very curious what that Jupiter Sun Cazimi in Leo will look like next year. Because we have, obviously Leo ruled by the sun, so I'm really looking forward to that. Um, yeah, and I think with the Jupiter Cazimi moment, it's like a reset point of these Jupiter topics, kind of like where do I want to go, and then with the sun especially, right? Because the sun kind of is also like a vision holder in a way where it's like the sun in our personal lives kind of talks about like our path and where we want to go and head towards. Like definitely did Jupiter and sun work together in that way of leading us towards that golden path we envision for our lives. And so when that reset moment comes, it's almost as like we're setting that compass to a new direction, or we're just like looking, is that still where I want to head? Is that still where I want to go? And since it's happening once a year and it's pretty much always like going to be in like a new sign, unless it happens, I think maybe like very early and then very late degrees the next year, but I don't have it in mind happening anytime recently. So it does almost feel like, because then we have a new house each year that it's activated in. It's like we get a new resetting point for that house in our lives and how we want to, like, what vision we want to have for that time. So for next year, like, look, for example, where Leo is, like, which house Leo rules in your chart. That's going to be the focal point of where you're setting your compass of where you want to go in that area of your life.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's really helpful to think about it that way. And it's really interesting, like juxtaposing it again with like Mercury. So Mercury has Cazimis like twice every retrograde,
Yeah.
right? So 3 times or 6 times a year. And I feel like those are, there can be news stories and things about it. But a lot of that is really like the personal like gnosis. And I'm sure there's still like a ton of personal gnosis that comes through in like this special moment with Jupiter. But I feel like it's also very indicative of like the vibe again, like the tone of the collective, but because it's like this slower moving planet that is more about like the broader vision. So it's interesting to think about them that way too.
Yeah, wait, you froze just for a second, and it might not be in the recording, but if you could just still repeat these last two sentences in case it didn't go
Sure.
through.
Sure. So, Jupiter and Mercury, I think like those Cazimis happen multiple times a year and oftentimes can be more on like the personal level, like the gnosis that comes through in those moments. It's like this moment of clarity, right? And then Jupiter can kind of be this moment of clarity that's more broad and maybe for the collective or like on a broader scale about the vibe, and maybe a little bit more tied to like your like life direction or your beliefs or like the bigger picture versus the mercurial like details. Um,
Yes, yes, and I think it ties also back to one thing you were speaking about before with these social trends. Like it almost feels like that's like the resetting moment of like the social trends and where we're heading for the next year. Again, like what's the vibe? What's the collective vibe for the next year? What are we going to focus on? It definitely has that flavor in it, that Cazimi moment. So it's going to be interesting what it's going to be in Leo. It's probably going to be a point where we're thinking of themes of like self, maybe themes of like I don't know, like luxury, like what does that mean in our lives? Obviously there's also like the eclipses happening, so it's not just that in isolation, but these are probably some themes that we can. So I'm like I said like two things. I don't know if you have any other Leo keywords to add here. Um,
yeah, I think like leaders and like royalty or like celebrities, I think
yeah.
like we'll see.
Yeah, yeah, I can see. Yeah, it makes sense that the celebrity culture would be, yeah, under the beam light, but with the south node traveling through, right?
I
Yeah,
think
it's a south node.
yeah, or be diminished in some
Yeah,
way.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, and then the eclipses are obviously going to be powerful. So, things we are looking forward to for next year. I think with Cancer, right? Because that's like that's what we can like immediately look back on. I don't know exactly when the Cazimi moment happened. Maybe you know it. I
It was
don't. I
pretty
don't.
early. Yeah, I think it was in like June
I
or
think it
July
was
maybe.
pretty early on. Yeah, yeah, and I think it set the tone of being a lot more about like mutual aid and care and healthcare workers and like helping people on the margins. Like it's like we're all in this together type of feeling. I think
I'm
that was.
also, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
sorry, say what you wanted to
I didn't
say.
mean to cut you off. I was just thinking, like with the trends and how, the Pantone color of the year, every year they announce as this color of
Yeah,
the year, and it was white for this year, which is trash as a choice, but is also like the color of Cancer, right? Like the moon, like white is one of the main colors
true.
associated with the moon. So it's like one, not surprising, and two, it's garbage. It's not a
That's so
but
funny. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they were announced like just recently, right? Like I
yeah,
saw the disputes around
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So is it gonna be yellow when Le
Gold.
with Leo next year or golden? That is a question. We're making a prediction. You'll can see if it's true next year. Yeah, and then is there anything else you want to say with like the Kazemi moments or
No, I think as far as the cycle goes though too, it's like we can look at like the opposition. So
Mm.
when the sun is in Capricorn, next week when after we're filming this, the sun will be making the opposition to Jupiter during that season. So I think that's really when we'll see like a lot of what seeds were planted, like what's really going on here. I think we'll get a lot more information in the coming weeks.
Oh
So,
yeah. And that opposition moment is extremely interesting in and of itself because it's like we kind of have a triple Cazimi sorry, that opposition moment because it's coincides with Mars and Venus coming together with the sun around that time as well. So it's like a triple opposition with two Cazimis opposing Jupiter in Cancer. Uh, I think that moment not just is going to clarify things with Jupiter, is also going to clarify what that Mars retrograde in Cancer was when we had it like end of last year and beginning of this year, most of the time. So it's like an extra reset moment or midpoint for like two cycles that are happening.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, which actually, I mean, that's actually a perfect segue to talk about Jupiter retrogrades because they happen once a year. So they happen like frequently all the time, although they are I feel like a lot of the outer planets go retrograde almost like at the same time each year, like maybe like give and take one day off every year. Jupiter is now Ju I don't know. Is it like a month or something or like 2 weeks? But it changes like more often when it goes retrograde than some other planets. Because I remember a few years back it went retrograde way sooner than it did not. Like now it went retrograde in November, right? Like beginning of November. Like I remember a few years ago, Jupiter already went retrograde in like summer. So it's
It's not as consistent.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so Jupiter retrograde, I mean, like any retrograde, it's going to always invoke those rewords. So like revisit, revise, rethink, reflect, but it's going to be more about like the Jupiterian theme. So it's like, what are your beliefs? Like, what are you here to do? Like, what do you, what is your like, sense of like order or whatever prioritization? Yeah, really getting us to kind of like reevaluate those things. And like then if that's like your chart ruler, it's gonna be mean that for like all of those things about yourself too. So things like revisiting your health or um who you are as a person. But yeah, whereas like Mercury retrograde, that's the one you hear about all the time. That's more
Mhm.
about like technology and like communication issues and things like that. Like Jupiter retrograde is just it's going to be more about like your vision for the future.
Yeah, especially because that retrograde period coincides exactly with what you said before, that opposition moment as well from the sun. So, like, of course, of course, that's going to be at play. And I think, like, because Jupiter goes retrograde every year for a few months, it's not crazy. It's not as groundbreaking as I don't know, when Mars goes retrograde, which is way less, or Venus goes retrograde. Like these are much more poignant. Um, Even Mercury, I guess we're just more used to Mercury going retrograde because it like does that all the time. But it's certainly these planets, like starting with Jupiter and then Saturn and then the outer planets, they go retrograde a few months of the year all the time. So it's nothing like we need to be afraid or scared of. It's usually working in the background anyways. Like it's not as loud as a Mercury retrograde. I feel like that Mercury retrograde that we just had right now was like a pretty loud one and it affected us and like we can really see it. Like we can see what it did. Jupiter retrogrades, I'm like, I wouldn't be able to tell you even right now what Jupiter retrograde in Cancer is like fully doing in my life. Like I would probably when we have that opposition moment in January with the sun, like that might be a moment of like, oh, like realization. But other than that, like it's not that and I don't think you should, like if you're trying to figure that out in your life, like you're not gonna understand fully what Jupiter retrograde is doing in your life for these, what, 4 months or something like that, that Jupiter is retrograde of the year. I don't think you have to. Like, it's going to be the loudest, I think, the day Mercury station's retrograde, the day Mercury station's direct, and probably that opposition moment. And obviously, any other significant transit that is unique to that specific Jupiter retrograde cycle.
Mhm. Yeah, I would say for like Sag risings and Pisces risings, it is a little
Hmm.
bit like I there's a vibe shift. Like it's like, oh, I don't know. I felt like I was moving in one direction and it's like, oh, like things are on hold. And it's just
Meek.
like more helpful as like a reflective thing of like, oh yeah, that's because it's my chart ruler's retrograde and it's not time to be like moving forward with certain things. So yeah, it's not like super loud, but it's like, oh yeah, that was like around when I kind of had to put a hold on some stuff. So
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, totally. But I feel like that's also like the point, right? It's like you feel that station of Jupiter going retrograde and direct, but like during that time, like during this month, it's probably not like super loud and clear what that
right.
retrograde is really doing because it's more so in the back. But it's the same with when Jupiter is direct as well. Like I wouldn't be able to tell you everything Jupiter in Cancer has been doing when Jupiter was direct in Cancer either. So again, it's that Jupiterian force that feels a bit intangible and invisible.
Mhm.
100%. And again, good thing that you said. Definitely everyone that is a Pisces rising or a Sag rising, whatever Jupiter does is going to be influential to you because it is the ruling planet of your rising. So if Jupiter ingresses, whatever Jupiter is doing, like transit wise, you're going to feel that 100%.
Yeah, it's interesting too, like natally, Jupiter retrograde, I have this and I think it's just more of like a delay on like those some of those
Mm.
beliefs or like, as a chart ruler, it's probably more so about like coming into myself as, a person, maybe later in life. It's tied to my career because it rules my 10th house. So there's like this maturing, I think that I'm hopeful is like going to be really helpful. Um, but also just, oh, I lost my train of thought. But there's something there about like, even if it's not your chart ruler, like maybe coming into your beliefs or something like that later in life, but also maybe
Mm.
just being a little bit like, I don't know, open-minded or maybe like opposing a little bit or like against the grain of like traditional beliefs or traditions in general. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I certainly think so. It's I think something you can also observe when either you have Jupiter by transit and opposing your natal Jupiter, or sometimes like you meet people and they have their Jupiter opposite your Ju natal Jupiter, and you can see there's just like this fundamental like difference in how you like kind of like go through the world and the way you like believe in things. Um, I don't have a lot of Jupiter and Leo folks in my life, but there's like one person I'm specifically thinking of right now. And like I can see how there's like a fundamental different belief where like their focus is more on thinking like, oh, everybody handles from like a selfish perspective. Like people go after what they want. And like as a Jupiter in Aquarius native, like that's not my belief. I don't like that's not how my worldview operates at all. And I think that's kind of like what we can also see here, what happens, like also or just by transit, you know. I'm sure next year when Jupiter moves into Leo and opposes my natal Jupiter, that's also kind of gonna come, or maybe be like an interesting experience in realizing like, oh, the trends of the world are like kind of clashing with my beliefs. And obviously that also like the squares, like the opening or the closing square that we can get from Jupiter, these probably tend to be interesting and also but like clashing with how we view things.
Mhm.
I don't know if you have anything to add to this.
No, I think I think you got it.
Yeah, I was just thinking if there's anything more. Yeah, well, I guess besides being like a Sag or Pisces rising and Jupiter is your natal ruler, uh, we were talking a bit about perfection years before. That is, even if you're not a Sag or Pisces rising, that's when you have a Jupiter activation. As a matter of fact, I'm currently having a Jupiter activation. Just recently turned 28, entered my fifth house perfection year. Pisces, Jupiter is my ruler for the year. So naturally, that planet is going to be more present into my life, and whatever Jupiter is doing that year is going to be much more influential to my sphere of experience than maybe other years. So that is also something that you can observe. So if you enter any sort of perfection year where Pisces or Sagittarius is being activated in your life, that means that Jupiter is going to be your ruler of the year. And whatever transiting Jupiter is doing at that time, because Jupiter might not be in Pisces or Sag at that time, is going to be influential to you during that time. And Jupiter might gain like a bigger influence in your life than it does usually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you could add to that too, like any kind of perfection year or transit is also going to have an impact on those Jupiter ruled houses. So even if you're not like a Pisces rising or Sag rising, if you're Virgo or Gemini rising, like that's going to be talking about like angular houses in your chart, right? Like that's still a pretty big deal. And then Cancers too, with Jupiter as their like exaltation ruler, like Jupiter is probably always going to have a little bit of a say at least in what's going on for you. So, yeah.
Yeah, it froze you for a bit again. I don't know why. I don't, my internet connection is good.
Mhm.
Maybe not. But you know, sometimes my Zoom does this weird little thing where it's like I lost connection, but it's still perfectly recorded the other person and what they were saying. So I hope that's what happened. But yeah, you were taught what exact in case it didn't, just
Yeah.
if you want to reiterate.
So I think, it's also important to note that like you have, even if you're not a Jupiterian rising, if you're not a Sag or a Pisces rising, um, Jupiter is going to rule over those houses in your chart. So
Mm.
like especially if you're a Virgo or a Gemini rising, like those are going to be angular houses for you. which is pretty important. If you have other planets in Sag or Pisces, like those things are going to be affected by Jupiter transits and perfection years. And then also, if you're like a Cancer rising or have like a prominent Cancer placement or have that angular in your chart, like Jupiter is going to have something to say about that too. So it is like transits in general, like it's easy to write them off as like only being for certain rising signs, but there is like some felt impact for sure for most people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think even right now it's like Jupiter is in Cancer, right? But it's like it's not just expanding your Cancer house. It's certainly also expanding and affecting wherever Sagittarius and Pisces are, what they're ruling, because they are always going to be influenced by what Jupiter is doing right now. So it is also affecting these places. Always, we always have to look a bit further, and that's, yeah, I think that's the beauty of astrology. It certainly sounds very complicated, I think, when you first like get into that, because like that's a more I think like traditional way of looking at like the houses and the planets and everything. But in my experience so far, observing things that way always made so much sense. Exactly, whatever house Sagittarius and Pisces rule in your house, always gonna be affected by what Jupe is doing. Okay, I think unless you have anything to add, we can talk a
Yeah.
bit about. Oh, sorry, do you have something to add?
I think one thing we kind of missed is just talking about how Jupiter, I mean, maybe we kind of said this, but Jupiter is in Cancer, which is ruled by the moon. And so this is kind of actually, I think, like helping out the moon as it travels through every sign
Mm,
every month, and how it's kind of like this benefactor, this big, benefic planet that's kind of giving the moon like some superpowers, even though it's moving quickly, it's meeting up with harsh planets or harsh signs that it doesn't like to be in. It's always gonna, when we look back to what's going on in Cancer, it kind of gets this extra boost from Jupiter. So I think when we say that Jupiter's exalted in Cancer, there's something there about like how everything is maybe just a little bit lighter, a little bit more buoyant with Jupiter there, because like the moon is being treated better or something. I don't
mm.
know.
I agree. Yes. And I don't have anything to add. Yeah, so we can. Well, I'm just wondering if we should talk briefly a bit about this before we talk about medical astrology, because I feel like it fits better to just mention it now. But from the Thema Mundi birth chart, which is like the birth chart of the world, where we have, right, like Leo is the sun and then Cancer is the moon, but then we have the other planets in these sections. And Jupiter in position towards the sun and the moon is in trine relationship towards them, which is why trines, the aspect of trines, is Jupiter infused in our lives. So when there are trines happening, and God knows, we just had grand water trines throughout November. Literally also Jupiter being part of that constellation, um, it has that flavor of being helpful, and I think that's a lot of what was happening, yeah, during like late November and also a bit of beginning of December, where also that Mercury retrograde that was part of it was really helping us like kind of go back to that past and like maybe sit with his feelings and actually like feel through them to be able to let them go. Like, is that a fun experience? Usually not so much, but we feel so much better afterwards. And that's like that Jupiter trine function of these, yeah, these trine aspects when they happen in the sky.
Yeah, I also see trines a lot as like you don't really even know that they're there. And it's kind of that same thing that you've been
Yeah.
saying about Jupiter, where it's just happening in the background. And like a lot of times when you do like a natal chart reading for someone and you see they have a trine, it's not something that they've ever really like thought about being helpful to them. But like when you talk about it, it's like, oh yeah, like that is easy. Or if they're,
Hmm.
reflective enough to get to that point, but like it's probably just something they've always had and haven't had to think much about. You'll hear some people will describe that maybe as like a point of laziness, um, but it's more just a point of ease that it comes easily and works together in a way that is so smooth that you don't even always realize it's happening.
Mm. Yeah, I like what you said, because that's a good point, and that's again this like protective factor where it's like if it comes natural to you and it's easy to you, you might not realize that for other people, like that does not come naturally to them at all. And you clearly have it maybe easier than the average person in that specific like life sectors or whatever, like houses this is happening. Um, Agreed, yeah. Almost like a blind spot, but like a good blind spot.
Totally.
Is there something else? Oh yeah, what I wanted to say about just like the comparing the sextiles and trines, which are like more pleasant aspects usually because they're influenced by the benefics. Again, I feel like comparing them to squares and oppositions. I feel like squares and oppositions are always like a tension point, which like forces us to do something. And when I say forces us, I do really mean forces us. Oftentimes, squares especially force us to get into action. Trines and sextiles feel much more like an invitation of like a do you want it to be this thing? Like, do you want to take the invitation? Um, and it's almost like it's up to you to like take it and indulge in it and take the benefit from it.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't think I have
Yes.
any.
Okay, okay. Well, then we can talk about Jupiter and medical astrology because I talk about every planet in medical astrology. I think it just gives us another glimpse of like how the planet shows up in our lives because obviously especially maybe you have Jupiter in the sixth house or a Pisces Sag sixth house, then Jupiter is kind of going to rule over your health or your health issues, or we can understand that more deeply. And so Jupiter in medical astrology influences arterial circulation, memory. Again, a big word you said a few times, the fibrin of blood, the disposition of fats, and regulates the sugars, which again has a lot to do with our hormones and our hormone regulation, lipids, the liver, and the gallbladder. And obviously, if Jupiter is afflicted, it can cause like a dysfunction of these things. Or, for example, if there's a disposition of like how the fats work or how your blood sugar is regulated, it can turn into things like obesity or diabetes. And that is also like an excess, right? Like sometimes like the cautionary tale of when Jupiter is transiting your first house is always in medical astrology, at least, like be wary of not overeating or not overstuffing yourself with sugary things because it's easily a time where you could gain more weight than you would want to. Um, Always depends on what Jupiter transit it is. Jupiter and Capricorn in the first house, like I wouldn't say so. Might do the opposite, and make you lose more weight than you would want to. But like Cancer risings, especially this year, like careful of overindulgence. Um, could obviously also lead to like eating disorders and things like that. And of course, also things that have to do with memory, so like loss of memory or trouble remembering things. And same thing here, right? It's when you think back at the myths we talk about with Jupiter, it's laziness and like not wanting to do things. Or it's like right when things are going good in your life and you're not getting like the consequences of your actions, it's like why would I change something? That type of thing. That can be like the downside of Jupiter. Yes. Is there anything you want to add to there? Otherwise, I'm gonna just keep on
No, I
talking.
don't. Yeah, I don't have much medical astrology background, so I won't try to speak to that. But I do know, Sagittarius is related to like the buttocks or like the glutes
Hmm.
and area. And then Pisces related to the feet. And yeah, I've found those things just knowing that and like see you kind of start to see it in people. Like my husband is like a Sag rising and is like very into like running per se. And so like his upper leg muscles like are very much an important thing to him. And even just thinking about like the centaur or like this image of like Sagittarius, like the buttocks or like the hind legs of the horse are just like so integral to that like figure. And then just personal experience, like as a Pisces rising, like since knowing that as an, studying astrology, becoming an astrologer, like just like being nicer to my feet and like being more aware of my feet and like, buying myself maybe like the nicer shoes, which is not something I've like ever invested in previously. It's like that has worked out nicely for me. So yeah, I guess that's just some personal experience from how I relate to those.
Yeah, I have somebody that I know, they're also a Pisces rising, and when Saturn moved into Pisces, they had an injury on their feet, like literally like maybe a week later when the transit happened, which restricted the way that they could walk. So definitely very, very present here. Um yeah, obviously right now you're talking about the rulers of Jupiter, which are Pisces and Sag. Which like we sometimes in medical astrology we have to be like careful to like because it's like there's things that Jupiter specifically rules over, and then there's like the rulers of that planet that also rule over organs, which again I don't want to make things like overly complicated here. You already said what's important, like Sag rules over like the hip area, the buttocks, the glutes, all of that, and Pisces rules over the feet. Jupiter, obviously, like on a more broader level, also influences our mental outlook and our emotional health, and like how we face setbacks, like how we handle that from like a mental level. And so obviously like a strong Jupiter can indicate optimism and overcoming health challenges, which is an extremely important thing to do, sometimes more important than the illness in and of itself. And there's many people that, and you can say what you want about it or not, but like apparently there's many people that through the power of belief have definitely influenced their states of well-being into a more positive states and overcome certain illnesses and issues. So and that is probably attributed to a strong Jupiter or a strong Jupiter transit during that time. And in this regard, also Jupiter rules over more like holistic methods that encompass the belief and faith in oneself as part of the healing process, as what I said, right? Um, but again, it's like that's like Jupiter, right? Like that's intangible. And I feel like that's where like a lot of the like medical industry is also very divided on, where it's like some people are like, oh, that's just placebo effect, blah blah blah. But and then at the same time, it's like, well, even if it's placebo, if it's working, what's wrong with that? Like sometimes placebo effects can be extremely powerful. It actually just goes to show how the power of our mind, how we like think of things, really influences our state of well-being. So that is definitely also Jupiter in the chart. When we are facing setbacks and challenges, what is your Jupiter doing? Can easily influence how you are like coping and dealing with these things.
Mhm. Yeah, something you're saying too is just reminding me of like, the mutable signs and how a big topic for me with Jupiter in Gemini really was like the paradox and like holding paradox and how
Mm.
two opposite opposing things can be true at the same time. And Jupiter rules over two mutable signs too. So I feel like there's like a thing with Jupiter about like the ninth house too, like the tie there with Sag risings and the sun ruling the ninth house. Like there's just something there about like science and belief and like research kind of all needing to come together and like working actually really nicely together. Um, that I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this other than saying like I think that that's like a Jupiter thing is like to have both. Why not both, right? Like
Oh yeah.
or to Mercury in that way.
Yeah, yeah, it's almost as if it's like I feel like where like modern medicine falls short on is incorporating that more holistic point of like belief 100% like influences our well-being, and there have been studies as far as I know where people have looked upon like if doctors gave the patients good prognosis or if they were like telling them like oh this is like hopeless, like that influences the state of the being of the patients and how they're like coping with what they have been told just before. And so it's like we cannot ignore that aspect. And yet obviously there's also like more to it. There's like certain things where it's like, okay, we need the logic, we need the science, we need to know what exactly we need to do when we do an operation on somebody. So yeah, I think that part is really interesting. And again, it's funny, right? It's once again Jupiter is chiming in as like this invisible force, where it's not so much about like the illnesses itself, like that's more like Mars territory. Mars rules over like injuries and illnesses and all of that. Jupiter is that part where it's like the invisible work in the back, which is about what is your worldview about that illness that you are maybe going through right now, or the disease that you're facing, or the setback that you're facing. What are you doing with that right now in your head? So, yeah, powerful force in the back once again. Yeah, you have anything more to add to that?
Nope, I don't think so.
Okay, well then we can before we close it off with the Orphic hymn, we can talk about just how to build a relationship with Jupiter on like a day-to-day basis. One thing I can reiterate from the other episodes is one of the easiest things for me, I think, is to just sit down on the planetary day, which for Jupiter is Thursday. And if you want to go even further, sitting down during the planetary hour that is associated with that planet. So on Jupiter day, during Jupiter hour, and again, I usually like to recite the Orphic hymn, which we're going to listen to afterwards, and just be in contact with that planet. Like make a Jupiter altar. The color of Jupiter is purple, which is why I'm wearing that. Again, also very protective color usually. Um, so yeah, like maybe just lighting a purple candle and talking to Jupiter. I feel like Jupiter is a really good planet to tell your prayers to, your visions, your dreams, right? It's like every planet has, because it's like deities, right? So it's like every planet is a kind of a different deity to whom you would go to for different things. And for Jupiter, I'm like, go, like, tell your prayers to Jupiter, tell your visions to Jupiter, tell your dreams to Jupiter. Yeah, like I feel like that's like a very good first step that one can do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I love like getting suggestions. Like you can look up, do your own research on like different things associated with the planets. And one that was just coming to mind that's easy is like oak is a Jupiterian tree. I like to have like acorns or something like that on my altar when I talk to Jupiter. But um but I also encourage you to like go and have your like personal gnosis, right? Like you can read all these lists, but then you can, once you start developing a relationship with Jupiter or spending time like thinking about it, like you start to have your own associations. And I really encourage you to do that too. I think one thing you mentioned earlier that's great is like giving to like a charitable cause,
Hmm.
giving money or time or resources to charity, and you can take it even further and like make that towards like a religious institution or toward a um some type of belief that you might have, or you can find a way to even like make it more specific, because I think a lot of you can do this with any planet really, where you're giving something toward a cause that is like specific to that planet. But Jupiter would be, you know, that would be one way of doing it. I think like children would be another good charitable cause for Jupiter, especially in Cancer right now. Um, I think like teaching or like mentoring or volunteering your time in that kind of way is another really good way to connect with Jupiter. Um, I think just in general, I really like to, I think it could be Jupiter remediation or veneration, but like just hosting parties and like feeding people, it's like I just love to do that. And it's now that I know that like this stuff about astrology, it like makes so much more sense and just makes me want to do it more. But like if you think about like the 11th house too, like those are things that Jupiter loves. So. Yeah. Do you have other ideas?
Yeah, I haven't thought so much about like hosting and everything because for me that's like more Venusian, but it makes a lot of sense with Jupiter having its joy in the 11th house and um I guess Venus is maybe a bit more private, right? Because that's like the fifth house. The fifth house is the joy of Venus, and then the 11th house would be more like larger parties or like going to art museums, something like that, or art installations. Certainly. And plant-wise, by the way, sage is a Jupiterian plant. Oh, like, of course it is. It has the name sage in its name, which is a wise teacher. So being in contact with that plant definitely helps as well, or even just saging yourself is also one way to get in touch with Jupiter, like cleanse yourself, all of that. Um, and I think on like I mean, on a very practical level, with doing things that require you to take leaps of faith, like that's how you get to know Jupiter in on a daily basis. Which, yeah, definitely not for the faint-hearted. Like that requires courage. So, but that is also how you can most definitely get to know Jupiter on yeah, on like a very practical note. Studying anything is Jupiterian. I think specifically studying philosophy is very Jupiterian. Like go and read any philosophy book. That is how you get to know Jupiter for sure, and how you make Jupiter very happy. Because I think Jupiter has also a lot to do with like contemplation and all of that. So, yes, anything else that comes to mind for you?
I think like I think we talked about before we started recording, but like the Sphere and Sundry, they have a great
Yes.
catalog of items that can like help you to like if you don't know anything about like plant correlation or correspondences, or other correspondences, like that is a great source for starting out and you'll be able to find a lot of information there. I don't have any of their like Jupiter specific products, but do you have those?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, we talked about this before, and I was like, how the heck did I not mention that in any episode that I did on the Meet the Planet series before? Because I have quite a few things from Spheres and Sundry, and it's like one of the best ways to get in touch with the planet if and like kind of like feel them without it getting like too close and too much. They do this great thing. It goes into the realm of like planetary magic where you sit down during a specific planetary day, planetary hour, and then you usually people what they would do is like talismans, which is something like doing a necklace. But that can kind of be quite heavy. And so what they phenomenally did is and I can let me just show something, although that's not Jupiter related, but like this is like a Venus tincture, Venus in Libra tincture. And so it's like it's not like a talisman where like I'm carrying it around my neck and it like feels very personal and heavy. But it's like I can get in touch with Venus and Libra here and there by just like putting a drop on my tongue and like getting into the feel of what that kind of feels like. And yeah, the very first thing I ordered from Spheres and Sundry was actually something from like the Jupiter and Sagittarius series, which is when I entered my second house perfection year, which is ruled by Jupiter, ruled by Sag in my case. So it was like the first thing that I got from them. So it feels very fitting that I am actually talking about it here on the Jupiter episode. I don't have anything anymore from that series because I used it all up. But it was I got the a salt bath salts, bath salts, and I think a body butter as well. So that was great to get in touch with Jupiter. I also at that time Diana Rose Harper, I think she like just did a like by Jove course or something. I don't think she has it anymore, but it was like right then and I was like, sign me up. And so that's also when I really connected to Jupiter for the first time. And when I realized this protective force, and it did kind of make me emotional when I realized that for the first time, because it was so like, wow, it's like Jupiter is always there, so invisible in a way. Like we really take it for granted. So definitely pay tribute to Jupiter. More so than not, because Jupiter's probably doing a lot that you don't even know and you don't even realize that Jupiter's doing in the back and helping your ass out.
Yeah, I'd say too, like, I think there's a tendency when people starting out like talk about Jupiter as kind of like this like wish daddy or something that's like will just like grant you your wishes and like that's all. And definitely I think there's more to it than that. I think like it's benefic and so I'm not like it's not like a word of warning or anything like that, but like I think that for me like the best experiences I've had with Jupiter are like when I feel small or like petty, which I have some placements in my chart that often will make me feel that way or like, want to like react in a certain way. It's like Jupiter is kind of like that temperance card comes back into play of like, okay, actually we can be gregarious, we can be generous, we can like um we feel better actually like when we tap into like how much abundance we do have versus like
Mhm.
going the like low taking the low road or something. I think I'm using like 10 different euphemisms in that statement, but like, we can transcend like some of these like human small feelings and like come back tenfold, like, or in a way that's way
Mm.
more generous or something. So that's like kind of why I've like named my business by Jove, why I go by that. It's like a reminder to myself of like ultimately at the end of the day, like this is how I want to act
Mhm.
and be known versus like some of the other things that like are maybe a little bit less, I don't know, kind. So
Yeah, no, I love that. That's such a good note to kind of like start closing this off from, I would say, unless there's anything else that like is coming to your mind and that you want to add for Jupiter.
no, I think that was like one of the last things I wanted to make sure I got in there. So
Heck yeah. Yeah. So, and what we do for every episode at the end, I let the guests read out the Orphic hymn because I just think it's a beautiful way to honor the gods and the deities that the planets resemble, and I certainly use them often when I want to connect to a planet. So I'm gonna let Janessa read the Orphic hymn of Jupiter.
right. Thanks. O Jove, much honored, Jove supremely great, to thee our holy rites we consecrate, our prayers and expiations, King divine, for all things round thy head exalted shine. The earth is thine and mountains swelling high, the sea profound and all within the sky. Saturnian king descending from above, magnanimous, commanding, sceptered Jove. All parent, principle, and end of all, whose power almighty shakes this earthly ball. Even nature trembles at thy mighty nod, loud sounding, armed with lightning, thundering God. Source of abundance, purifying king, O various formed, from whom all natures spring. propitious, hear my prayer, give blameless health, with peace divine and necessary wealth.
I love it. It's very simple. I feel like out of all the Orphic hymns, so it's a very simple one, and I think that's Jupiter. So yeah, since we're coming to close, Janessa, do you want to tell where people can find you, what your offerings are, anything that you deem as important?
Yeah, so you can find me on socials at byjoveastro. My website is really probably the best place, byjoveastrology.com. I've got some different offerings there. I have a couple different like pre-recorded ones so that you don't have to schedule anything. I just kind of record and send it to you, and it's the right time when it arrives. And then I do have some openings for one-on-one client work too. So yeah.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much for being on here. This podcast, right, or podcast series, Meet the Planets, is available on YouTube and on Spotify, depending on where you're listening this from. You can check out vice versa, depending on from where you're listening this right now. There's on Spotify, I usually just have the podcast episodes, but on YouTube, I have a lot more weekly transit overviews, horoscopes, a lot more fun things. So if you're listening on Spotify, feel free to jump over on YouTube. There's a lot more stuff on there. And yeah, you can find me everywhere under Resonance Astrology pretty much. My Instagram is Resonance Astrology as well. And all the links to all our socials and how you can stay connected to us will be down in the description below. And I think this is all I have to say. So, again, thank you so much for being here. It was a joy doing the Jupiter episode with you. And I hope that everyone listening gets a new understanding of Jupiter, what Jupiter is doing in your chart, and how you can connect to this greater benefic in your life.
Thank you so much for having me, Amiya.
Great. Well, goodbye, everyone.